The champagne glass shattered against marble exactly 3 seconds before Victor Carzon's voice cut through the Manhattan ballroom like a blade through silk. Lena Hart stood frozen in her borrowed dress, cheap fabric suddenly feeling like a costume, as 200 pairs of eyes turned toward the waitress who dared to exist among them. The man who'd just humiliated her, some banker's son with too much cologne and entitlement, was still laughing when Victor's hand closed around his wrist with surgical precision. "Apologize," Victor said quietly, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lena didn't know who this man was, didn't understand why the entire gala had gone silent, didn't realize that in 5 more seconds, he would extend his hand toward her and change everything. She only knew that for the first time in her life, someone powerful had looked at her like she mattered. Want to see how a single dance can rewrite a woman's destiny? Stay until the end of this story, and don't forget to hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far Lena's journey travels. Bus. The subway had broken down twice on the way to the Upper East Side, and Lena Hart had seriously considered turning around both times. The dress she wore, a simple black cocktail number that Mrs. Chen from 4B had insisted she borrow, fit well enough, but it couldn't hide what she was. A diner waitress. A woman who served coffee to construction workers at 5 in the morning and went home smelling like grease and disappointment. But Mrs. Chen had been so insistent, her wrinkled hands pressing the gilded invitation into Lena's palm with an urgency that seemed almost desperate. "You go for me," the elderly woman had said in her broken English, her eyes carrying shadows Lena didn't understand. "You young, you should see that world, just once." The charity gala was being held at the Rothmore Hotel, a building so expensive that Lena had only ever walked past it quickly, eyes down, afraid that even looking at it too long might somehow cost her money she didn't have. The invitation had listed Mrs. Chen as a guest. Apparently she'd donated to this particular children's hospital charity decades ago, back when her late husband had been alive and successful. Now Lena stood in the golden lobby, security guards checking her invitation with skeptical eyes, and wondered what the hell she'd been thinking. "Mrs. Chen?" one guard asked, looking between the invitation and Lena's 26-year-old face. "She's ill," Lena said, lifting her chin with more confidence than she felt. "I'm attending in her place." She called ahead. This was technically true. Mrs. Chen had made Lena call the event organizers that morning, explaining the situation. They'd been surprisingly accommodating, probably because they assumed anyone who'd received an invitation was wealthy enough not to bother lying about it. The guard waved her through, and Lena stepped into the ballroom. The room stole her breath. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from ceilings painted with clouds and cherubs. The floor was white marble veined with gold, so polished that Lena could see her reflection looking back at her, nervous, out of place, clutching a small purse she'd borrowed from her roommate. Women in gowns that cost more than Lena's yearly rent glided past, dripping diamonds and perfume. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos gathered in clusters, laughing with the easy confidence of people who'd never worried about rent. Lena gravitated toward the edge of the room, toward the shadows near the tall windows overlooking Central Park. If she stayed quiet, stayed invisible, she could observe this world for one evening and leave without anyone noticing she didn't belong. She'd been invisible her whole life. What was one more night? A waiter passed with a tray of champagne and Lena took a glass just to have something to hold. The bubbles tickled her nose. She'd never had real champagne before, just the cheap stuff her roommate brought home from the liquor store on New Year's Eve. "You look lost." Lena turned to find a woman in her 50s wearing a silver gown and a kind smile. Her name tag identified her as Patricia Holloway, event coordinator. "First time at one of these?" Patricia asked gently. Lena managed to smile. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who's worked 100 of them." Patricia's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Don't let them intimidate you, dear. Half these people inherited their money, and the other half are so busy trying to impress each other that they've forgotten how to be human. You'll do fine." Before Lena could respond, Patricia was called away by someone with a clipboard emergency, leaving Lena alone again with her champagne and her borrowed dress. The orchestra began to play, something classical and sweeping that Lena didn't recognize. Couples moved onto the dance floor with practiced elegance, their movements so synchronized they might have been choreographed. Lena watched them, fascinated despite herself. This was a different world, a different species, almost. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Lena glanced at the empty chair beside her and shook her head. A young man, probably in his early 30s, with styled blonde hair and a smile that showed too many teeth, sat down without waiting for a verbal answer. Bradley Morrison, he said, extending his hand. My father's on the hospital board. Lena, she replied, shaking his hand briefly. She didn't offer her last name, didn't mention her father, who'd left when she was 6 and hadn't been heard from since. First time at the Rothmore Gala? Bradley asked, his eyes traveling over her dress in a way that made Lena's skin prickle. Yes, I could tell. He leaned back, champagne sloshing slightly in his glass. You've got that deer in headlights look. It's actually kind of refreshing. Everyone here is so jaded. Lena didn't know how to respond to that, so she took another sip of champagne. So what do you do, Lena? Bradley asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. This was the question she'd been dreading. She could lie, should lie, probably, but something stubborn rose in her chest, some small spark of pride that refused to be ashamed. I'm a waitress, she said clearly, at Metro Diner on 42nd Street. Bradley's smile didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. A waitress? How democratic of the organizers to include such diverse guests. The condescension in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Lena felt her cheeks flush. I'm here representing a friend who couldn't attend, she said, keeping her voice level. Of course you are. Bradley's smile widened. He turned to the couple at the next table, a man in his 40s with slicked back hair and a woman wearing emeralds, and raised his voice just enough. Marcus, you'll appreciate this. I've just met our token working class representative for the evening. Apparently the organizers are very committed to diversity. The couple glanced over, and Lena saw the woman's lips curve into a smirk. Heat flooded Lena's face, but before she could stand up and leave with what remained of her dignity, Bradley continued, clearly enjoying himself now that he had an audience. Tell me, Lena, do you find it challenging to navigate an event like this? I imagine the etiquette must be quite different from, say, a diner. He picked up his champagne glass, examining it theatrically. For instance, are you familiar with which fork to use for the salad course? Something in Lena snapped. She'd spent her entire life being invisible, being dismissed, being treated like she didn't matter because she wasn't born with money or connections. She'd accepted it because fighting back had never seemed worth the energy. But sitting here in this golden room, wearing a borrowed dress and being mocked for sport by a man who'd probably never worked a real day in his life. I'm familiar enough, Lena said, her voice harder than she'd intended. But thank you for your concern about my education, Bradley. It's touching that you're so invested in the welfare of the working class. Bradley's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened. Careful, sweetheart. Attitude won't get you far in this world. Neither will being an asshole, Lena shot back, but you seem to be doing fine. The couple at the next table gasped. Bradley's face flushed red. You little... He reached for his champagne glass, and for one terrible moment, Lena thought he might actually throw it at her. He did. The glass left his hand in a smooth arc, champagne spraying outward like liquid gold. Lena jerked backward, but not fast enough. The champagne hit her dress, her chest, her face, cold and sticky and humiliating. The glass itself sailed past her and shattered against the marble floor with a sound that cut through the orchestra like a gunshot. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. 200 people turned to look. Lena stood frozen, champagne dripping down her borrowed dress, her face burning with shame so intense she thought she might actually vomit. Bradley was already rising from his chair, his expression shifting from anger to calculated regret. The look of someone preparing to play the victim. She insulted me, he announced to the watching crowd, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. I was simply trying to make conversation, and she became hostile and aggressive. I may have overreacted, but you may have overreacted. The voice came from behind Lena, low and smooth and edged with something that made the hair on her arms stand up. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The quiet authority in those 5 words commanded more attention than Bradley's theatrical outburst. Lena turned. The man standing 10 feet away was probably in his late 30s, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and eyes so dark they were almost black. He wore a tuxedo that fit him with the kind of perfection that suggested it had been made specifically for his body, and he held himself with an absolute stillness that reminded Lena of a predator deciding whether to strike. But it was the reaction of everyone else that truly caught her attention. Bradley had gone pale. The couple at the next table had suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. Around the ballroom, Lena could see people stepping backward, creating space, their faces carefully neutral. Whoever this man was, he terrified them. "Mr. Karzan?" Bradley stammered, and Lena caught the tremor in his voice. "I didn't see you there. This is just a misunderstanding. You threw a glass at a woman." The man, Karzan, stepped forward with unhurried grace, closing the distance between them. "In my experience, there's very little room for misunderstanding in an action that direct." His accent was subtle, Eastern European maybe, smoothed by years of speaking English, but still present in the slight roll of his R's, the precise way he shaped his vowels. "She was disrespectful," Bradley tried again, but his voice had lost its confidence. Karzan glanced at Lena for the first time, his dark eyes moving over her champagne-soaked dress with an expression she couldn't read. Then he looked back at Bradley, and Lena saw the younger man actually flinch. "Apologize," Karzan said quietly. "I don't think—" Karzan moved forward another step. He didn't touch Bradley, didn't raise his voice, didn't make any overt threat. But something in his posture, in the absolute certainty of his presence, made Bradley crumble. "I'm sorry," Bradley gasped, looking at Lena with wide, frightened eyes. "I'm sorry for throwing the glass. I shouldn't have done that. I apologize." Karzan studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Leave." Bradley didn't argue. He walked toward the exit with quick, jerky steps, and Lena noticed that he kept glancing over his shoulder like he expected Karzan to follow him. The ballroom remained silent, tension humming through the air like electricity. Karzan turned to Lena, and she found herself looking directly into those dark, unreadable eyes. Up close, she could see that his face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, handsome in a severe, dangerous way. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and his voice was different when he addressed her, still controlled but softer somehow. Lena shook her head. "Just wet and embarrassed." "The embarrassment belongs to him, not you." Karzan glanced around the ballroom, and Lena saw people quickly avert their gazes. And anyone else who stood by and watched. He turned back to her, and for the first time, something almost like warmth entered his expression. "Dance with me." It wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between. Lena stared at him. "I'm covered in champagne." I noticed. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Dance with me anyway." "I don't even know who you are." "Victor Karzan." He extended his hand, palm up, waiting. "And you are?" "Lena Hart." She looked at his hand, then at the watching crowd, then back at his face. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to," Victor said simply, "and because they need to see that their cruelty has consequences." Lena understood then. This wasn't really about her. It was about power, about demonstrating that Victor Karzan could elevate a champagne-soaked waitress to the center of the ballroom and no one would dare object. She should refuse, should walk away from this strange, intense man in this world of people who threw champagne and played games with other people's dignity. But when she looked into Victor's eyes, she saw something unexpected. Not pity, not condescension, just interest, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. And beneath her embarrassment, beneath her anger, Lena felt something else rising. Defiance, stubbornness, the same spark that had made her talk back to Bradley in the first place. If they were going to stare at her anyway, she might as well give them something to stare at. Lena placed her hand in Victor's. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and certain, and he led her onto the dance floor. The crowd parted like water, people stepping back to create space, and Lena felt their eyes following every step. Victor's other hand settled at her waist, and Lena placed her free hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. He held her at a proper distance, formal and correct, but his eyes never left her face. The orchestra resumed playing, a waltz this time, and Victor began to move. Lena had never waltzed in her life. She'd slow danced at her high school prom with a boy who stepped on her feet every third beat, and she'd swayed drunkenly to music at a few college parties before she dropped out to work full-time. But this was different. Victor led with absolute confidence, his hand at her waist guiding her through turns and steps she didn't know but somehow managed to follow. He moved like someone who'd been taught to dance in childhood, who'd practiced until it became muscle memory. and his certainty made it easy for Lena to trust his lead. "You're doing well," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "You're following. That's all dancing is." His eyes held hers. Trust and response. They turned, and Lena caught a glimpse of the watching crowd. Every face was turned toward them. Some expressions showed shock, others confusion. A few carried barely concealed anger. But no one looked away. "They're staring," Lena whispered. "Let them." "You don't care what they think?" Something dark flickered across Victor's face. "I stopped caring what people think a very long time ago." He spun her gently, and when she came back to face him, he added, "But I care very much what they do. And tonight, they did nothing while a man humiliated a woman for their entertainment. So this is punishment? This is a lesson." Victor's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "They need to remember that power isn't just about money or connections. It's about who you're willing to stand beside." The words should have sounded arrogant. Coming from anyone else, they would have. But Victor delivered them with such quiet certainty that they felt like simple fact. The waltz ended, and another began immediately, the orchestra apparently deciding to keep playing until Victor stopped dancing. Lena realized that he must have signaled them somehow, must have indicated that he wanted the music to continue. How much power did you need to control an orchestra with a glance? "You're not what I expected," Victor said as they moved through the second dance. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would run." His eyes searched her face. "Most people do when I approach them." "Should I be running?" Victor's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile on a different man. "Probably." Lena knew she should be frightened. Everything about the situation screamed danger. The way people avoided looking at Victor directly, the terror in Bradley's eyes, the absolute authority with which Victor commanded the room. But fear felt distant compared to the adrenaline singing through her veins, the strange thrill of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. "Who are you, really?" she asked. "I told you. Victor Karzon." "That's a name, not an answer." His eyes darkened with something that might have been amusement. "What do you want to know?" "Why everyone's afraid of you." Victor was silent for several beats, guiding her through a turn before answering. "Because I own things they value. Because I have resources they need. Because I've never hesitated to protect what's mine." He paused. "And because I come from a world that doesn't forgive weakness." It wasn't a complete answer, but it was honest enough that Lena appreciated it more than a comforting lie would have been. "What do you do?" she pressed. "I facilitate transactions. I connect people who need things with people who can provide them. I solve problems that others can't solve through conventional means." Lena had waited tables long enough to recognize evasion when she heard it. "That sounds like a very expensive way of saying you're a criminal." To her surprise, Victor laughed, a short, genuine sound that transformed his severe features into something almost warm. "You're direct. I appreciate that." "You didn't answer the question." "No," Victor agreed. "I didn't." The second waltz ended. The ballroom had remained silent throughout both dances, the only sound the orchestra and the whisper of Lena's borrowed dress against the marble floor. Now, as the music faded, a smattering of applause began, tentative at first, then growing stronger as people apparently decided it was safe to approve of Victor's actions. Victor ignored the applause entirely. He released Lena slowly, his hands lingering at her waist and palm for just a moment longer than necessary, and then stepped back with a small bow that somehow seemed both mocking and sincere. "Thank you for the dance, Lena Hart." "Thank you for—" Lena gestured vaguely at herself, the crowd, the ballroom. "Whatever this was a statement," Victor said quietly, "that you deserve better than the cruelty of small men." Before Lena could respond, a tall man in a dark suit appeared at Victor's elbow. He had the build of a boxer and the watchful eyes of a bodyguard, and he leaned in to whisper something in Victor's ear. Victor's expression didn't change, but Lena saw his shoulders tense slightly. "I need to attend to something," he said to Lena, "but I'd like to ensure you get home safely. My driver will take you wherever you need to go." "That's not necessary." "It wasn't a request." Victor's voice remained gentle, but there was steel beneath the velvet. "Bradley Morrison is a coward and a fool, but his father has resources and a vindictive streak. I'd prefer to know you arrived home without incident." The implication was clear. Victor had humiliated the Morrison family publicly, and they might decide to take their revenge on the easiest target, Lena. Fear flickered through her chest, cold and real. I can take the subway. You could. Victor pulled a phone from his pocket, sleek and probably worth more than everything Lena owned, and typed something quickly. But you won't. My driver is already waiting outside. He'll take you home, wait to ensure you enter your building safely, and then leave. That's all. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Lena saw something unexpected in his dark eyes. Concern. Real, genuine concern for a woman he'd met 15 minutes ago. Please, Victor added, and the word sounded strange coming from him, like he didn't use it often. Lena nodded slowly. Okay, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Victor glanced around the ballroom at the people pretending not to watch them while hanging on every word. You've been seen with me now. That carries consequences. What kind of consequences? The complicated kind. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened. I really do need to go. My driver's name is Alexei. He'll be at the front entrance in a black Mercedes. He knows to look for you. He started to turn away, then paused and looked back. This event continues for another 3 hours. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. No one will bother you now. It was true, Lena realized. The nearby guests were giving her space, their expressions ranging from curiosity to wariness. She'd somehow been elevated from invisible waitress to someone associated with Victor Karzan, and that changed everything. I think I'll go home, Lena said. The borrowed dress was still damp with champagne, and her heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. Victor nodded once, sharp and final. Then I'll say goodnight, Lena Hart. It was a pleasure meeting you. He walked away before she could respond, the bodyguard falling into step beside him. Lena watched them leave through a side door and noticed how the crowd parted for Victor the same way it had on the dance floor, automatically, reflexively, like people moving away from a flame. She stood alone in the center of the ballroom, champagne drying sticky on her dress, while New York's elite pretended not to stare at her. The event coordinator, Patricia, appeared at her elbow with a kind smile and a small towel. That was quite an entrance, dear. It wasn't intentional. The best ones never are. Patricia pressed the towel into Lena's hands. There's a ladies' room through that archway if you want to clean up, or Mr. Karzan's driver should be ready whenever you are. Lena took the towel gratefully. How did you know about the driver? Patricia's smile widened slightly. Mr. Karzan texted me. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Between you and me, I've worked these events for 20 years, and I've never seen him dance with anyone before. You must have made quite an impression. The words should have been flattering, but they sent a chill down Lena's spine instead. She'd made an impression on a man who terrified a room full of wealthy, powerful people. A man who'd casually mentioned coming from a world that doesn't forgive weakness. What the hell had she gotten herself into? Lena cleaned herself up as best she could in the ladies' room, a space so luxurious it had a sitting area and an attendant offering perfume and mints. The champagne had left her dress damp and sticky, but the worst of it wiped away. She stared at herself in the gold-framed mirror, at her flushed cheeks and wide eyes, and tried to process what had just happened. A man had humiliated her. Another man had defended her. She'd danced in front of New York's elite, and now she was about to be driven home in a Mercedes by someone named Alexei. Her phone buzzed in her borrowed purse, a text from her roommate Jamie. How's the fancy party? Meet any rich single guys? Lena almost laughed. If only Jamie knew. She typed back. It's complicated. Tell you when I get home. The front entrance of the Rothmore was even more intimidating than the ballroom, all gold fixtures and doormen in pristine uniforms. Lena stepped outside into the cool October evening and immediately spotted the black Mercedes idling at the curb. A man stood beside it, tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head, and the kind of still watchfulness that marked him as security. He looked at Lena and nodded once. Miss Hart? His accent was thick, Russian maybe. I am Alexei. Mr. Karzan asked me to drive you home. Lena approached the car slowly, part of her still not quite believing this was happening. This really isn't necessary. Mr. Karzan believes it is. Alexei opened the back door for her. Please. The interior of the Mercedes was all black leather and gleaming chrome, with more legroom than Lena's entire bedroom. She slid inside, feeling absurdly out of place, and Alexei closed the door gently before returning to the driver's seat. "Where to, Miss Hart?" Lena gave him her address in Brooklyn, a fourth-floor walk-up in a building that was charitably described as character-filled and more honestly described as falling apart. Alexei entered it into the GPS without comment and pulled smoothly into traffic. They drove in silence for several minutes. Lena watched the city slide past, from the glittering towers of Manhattan to the bridge leading to Brooklyn, from wealth to working class in the space of a few miles. The contrast had never felt more stark. "May I ask you something, Miss Hart?" Alexei's voice was quiet, respectful. "Sure. Have you known Mr. Karzan long?" "I met him tonight, about half an hour ago." In the rearview mirror, Lena saw Alexei's eyebrows rise slightly. "I see. Why do you ask?" Alexei was quiet for a moment, navigating through traffic with the ease of someone who'd driven these streets 1,000 times. "Mr. Karzan does not usually involve himself in—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Public situations. He prefers to remain in the background." "He wasn't very background tonight." "No," Alexei agreed. "He was not." They lapsed back into silence, but Lena's mind was racing. Everything about tonight felt surreal. The gala, the humiliation, Victor's intervention, the dance, and now this, being driven through Brooklyn in a car that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. "Is he dangerous?" Lena heard herself ask. Alexei met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Karzan is many things, Miss Hart. Dangerous is certainly one of them, but not to those he has chosen to protect." "And how do you know who he's chosen to protect?" "Because," Alexei said quietly, "he sent me to drive you home." The car pulled up in front of Lena's building, a worn brick structure wedged between a laundromat and a bodega. Graffiti decorated the lower walls, and one of the second-floor windows was cracked and covered with cardboard. It was home, but seeing it through the Mercedes window made Lena acutely aware of the distance between her world and Victor's. Alexei got out and opened her door before she could reach for the handle. He stood at the curb, waiting patiently while Lena gathered her purse and climbed out onto the sidewalk. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "It was my pleasure." Alexei glanced up at the building. "Which apartment?" "4th floor, but you really don't need to wait. Mr. Karzan asked me to ensure you enter safely." Alexei's expression was polite but immovable. "I will wait until I see your light turn on." Lena realized arguing was pointless. 4th floor, second window from the right. She climbed the stairs, the elevator had been broken for 3 weeks, and let herself into the apartment she shared with Jamie. The lights were off. Her roommate was probably at her bartending shift. Lena went to the window that faced the street and looked down. The Mercedes was still there, Alexei standing beside it. Lena turned on the lamp. Even from 4 floors up, she saw Alexei nod. He got back into the car and pulled away, and Lena stood at the window watching until the Mercedes disappeared around the corner. Then she collapsed onto the sagging couch and let herself shake. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Jamie. "Girl, you can't just say it's complicated and leave me hanging." Lena stared at the message, trying to figure out how to explain what had happened. How did you tell someone that you'd been publicly humiliated, defended by a man who radiated danger, danced in front of Manhattan's elite, and been driven home by someone who might be a professional criminal? She was still staring at her phone when it buzzed again. But this time it wasn't Jamie. The number was unfamiliar, but the message was brief and direct. "I hope you arrived safely." Lena's heart kicked against her ribs. Victor had her number. How did he have her number? She hadn't given it to him. Hadn't given it to Alexei either, which meant he'd gotten it some other way. She should be frightened, should block the number and forget this entire evening ever happened, should go back to her invisible life and never think about dark eyes and dangerous men again. Instead, Lena texted back, "I did. Thank you for arranging the ride." The response came almost immediately. "You're welcome. Sleep well, Lena Hart." Lena set her phone down and stared at the cracked ceiling of her apartment, her heart still racing, her borrowed dress still damp with champagne. She had the strangest feeling that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. And somewhere in Manhattan, in a world she'd only glimpsed for a few hours, a man named Victor Karzan was probably thinking the same thing. The text messages started the next morning. Lena woke at 6:30 to the sound of construction outside her window, the usual symphony of jackhammers and shouting that served as her alarm clock in this neighborhood. She reached for her phone, squinting against the early light, and found 3 new messages. The first was from Jamie, sent at 2 in the morning. Girl, you better have details when I get home. The second was from Mrs. Chen. You come see me today? Tell me about party? The third was from Victor. Good morning. I trust you slept well. Lena stared at that last message for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the screen. The smart thing would be to not respond, to let last night fade into a strange memory and return to her normal life. But even as she thought it, she knew that ship had sailed the moment she'd placed her hand in Victor's on that dance floor. She typed back, well enough. You? The response came within seconds. I rarely sleep more than 4 hours. Old habit. Before Lena could decide how to respond to that, another message appeared. Are you working today? Yes. Morning shift at the diner. What time do you finish? Lena hesitated. This felt like dangerous territory, like standing at the edge of something she couldn't see the bottom of. But curiosity and something else, something that felt like attraction mixed with adrenaline, pushed her forward. 2 o'clock. I'd like to see you, if you're willing. Her heart kicked into a faster rhythm. Why? Because I enjoyed our conversation last night, and because there are things you should know. The second sentence sent a chill down her spine. What kind of things? The kind best discussed in person. I'll send Alexei to pick you up at 2:15, unless you'd prefer not to. Lena sat up in bed, her mind racing. Every instinct she'd developed growing up in this city, every warning her mother had given her before cancer took her 5 years ago, screamed that she should say no, that she should block this number and pretend Victor Carzon didn't exist. But she thought about the way he'd looked at her last night, not with pity or condescension or the leering interest she got from some of the diner's customers. He'd looked at her like she was someone worth paying attention to, like she mattered. When was the last time anyone had made her feel like that? Okay, she typed. Where? Somewhere we can talk privately. You'll be safe, Lena. You have my word. The promise should have sounded empty coming from a man she'd known for less than 12 hours. Instead, it settled something nervous in her chest. I'll see you at 2:15. She got through her shift at Metro Diner on autopilot, pouring coffee and taking orders and dodging the wandering hands of regulars who thought a $5 tip bought them permission to touch. Her mind kept drifting back to Victor, to the quiet authority in his voice, the way the entire ballroom had gone silent when he spoke, the feeling of his hand at her waist as they danced. You're distracted today, observed Marcus, the line cook, as Lena picked up an order of eggs and hash browns. He was in his 50s, with tattooed arms and a perpetual scowl that hid a surprisingly soft heart. Man trouble? Something like that, Marcus grunted. The good kind or the bad kind? I'm not sure yet. Well, if he gives you the bad kind, you let me know. I got a baseball bat in the back that's real good at solving problems. Lena smiled despite her nerves. I'll keep that in mind. At 2 o'clock, she clocked out and changed in the tiny employee bathroom, trading her grease-stained uniform for jeans and a simple black sweater. She'd thought about dressing up, then decided against it. Whatever this was with Victor, she wasn't going to pretend to be someone she wasn't. The black Mercedes was waiting at the curb when she stepped outside, Alexei standing beside it in a dark suit that probably concealed at least one weapon. He nodded to her as she approached. Miss Hart, Mr. Carzon is waiting. Where are we going? His office, not far. Alexei opened the door, and Lena slid inside. The drive took less than 10 minutes, cutting through Midtown to a building that looked unremarkable from the outside. Gray stone, maybe 15 floors, with no obvious signage. But the lobby they entered through a side door was clearly expensive, all marble and dark wood and security cameras that tracked their movement. Alexei led her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. They rode up in silence, and Lena tried not to think about how isolated she was right now, how completely she'd trusted a man she barely knew. The elevator opened directly into what appeared to be a penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the furniture was all clean lines and expensive leather. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, but Victor wasn't sitting behind it. He stood at the windows, his back to the elevator, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He turned as they entered, and Lena's breath caught. In the daylight streaming through the windows, she could see details she'd missed last night, the small scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the silver threading his dark hair, the way his eyes tracked her movement with absolute focus. Lena, he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, deliberate, important. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation. She glanced around the office, noting the lack of personal items, the almost clinical cleanliness. Nice place. It serves its purpose. Victor nodded to Alexei. Thank you. We'll be fine. Alexei left without a word, and suddenly Lena was alone with Victor in this glass tower above the city. The air felt charged with something she couldn't name. Would you like something to drink? Victor moved to a small bar against one wall. Coffee, water, something stronger? Water's fine. He poured 2 glasses from a crystal decanter and brought one to her. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and Lena felt that contact like electricity. Why am I here, Victor? He studied her for a moment, then gestured to a leather couch near the windows. Please, sit. This conversation might take some time. Lena sat, and Victor took the chair across from her, close enough to maintain intimacy but far enough to give her space. It was the positioning of someone used to managing other people's comfort levels. I want to be honest with you, Victor began, his dark eyes never leaving her face, about who I am and what being seen with me means. I already know you're dangerous. Your driver told me. A flicker of something, amusement, approval, crossed Victor's features. Alexei has been with me for 15 years. He's loyal, but he's also protective of people he thinks are innocent. He paused. Did he warn you away from me? He said you were dangerous, but not to people you'd chosen to protect. He's correct on both counts. Victor leaned back in his chair, the movement controlled and graceful. I'm going to tell you things that might frighten you, Lena. And after I do, you're going to have a choice to make. Lena's heart was hammering now, but she kept her voice steady. I'm listening. Victor was silent for a long moment, as if choosing his words carefully. My family came to this country 30 years ago from Russia. My father was involved in what you might call organized business, moving money, solving disputes, providing services that existed outside legal channels. I grew up in that world, learned its rules, and when my father died 8 years ago, I inherited his empire. He delivered this information calmly, watching her reaction. Lena forced herself not to flinch, not to show the fear crawling up her spine. I've spent the last 8 years legitimizing what I could and managing what I couldn't, Victor continued. I own property, invest in businesses, facilitate connections between people who need things and people who can provide them. Much of what I do is legal. Some of it operates in gray areas, and some of it, he paused. Some of it would be difficult to explain to law enforcement. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you I exist in a world where the lines between legal and illegal are negotiable, depending on who you know and what resources you control. Victor's gaze remained steady. I don't traffic in drugs. I don't harm children. I don't deal in human misery. But I have power, Lena, and I use it to maintain my position and protect my interests. Lena took a sip of water, buying herself time to process. Why are you telling me this? Because after last night, people in my world and yours will assume we have some connection. They'll wonder if you're important to me, and that attention carries risk. What kind of risk? Victor's expression darkened. Bradley Morrison's father called me this morning. He was apologetic. His son behaved badly. He understands I was right to intervene, no hard feelings. But underneath the apology, there was a warning. He wanted me to know that he's aware of who you are, where you work, where you live. Ice flooded Lena's veins. He threatened me? He implied that my protection of you created an association between us that his family finds noteworthy. Victor's voice had gone cold, and Lena glimpsed the man who made an entire ballroom go silent with 5 words. It was subtle, but the message was clear. They're watching you to see if you matter to me. And do I? The question came out before Lena could stop it. Victor looked at her for a long moment. I don't know yet, but I'd like the opportunity to find out. Lena stood abruptly, moving to the windows to put some distance between them. Below, the city sprawled in all directions, millions of people going about their lives, unaware of the dangerous currents flowing beneath the surface. She'd been one of them yesterday morning. Invisible, safe, ordinary. You're saying that because you danced with me, I'm now a target. I'm saying that because I publicly demonstrated interest in you, certain people will pay attention to determine if you're leverage they can use against me. Victor rose and crossed to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. And I'm saying that I can protect you from that attention if you'll allow me to. Lena turned to face him. How? By making it clear that you're under my protection, that anyone who bothers you answers to me. His eyes searched her face. It would require you to be seen with me occasionally, publicly, enough to establish that you're important. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend. I want you to be whatever you choose to be, Victor corrected gently. But yes, a public connection would discourage anyone from using you to get to me, and it would give me an excuse to ensure your safety. Lena laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. This is insane. I don't even know you. No, Victor agreed. But you could, if you wanted to. Why? Lena demanded, frustration and fear making her voice sharp. Why do you care what happens to some waitress you met at a party? What do you get out of this? Victor was quiet for so long that Lena thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it yet. Do you know what I saw when I looked at you last night? A woman who didn't belong in that ballroom but refused to apologize for being there, who spoke her mind even when it was dangerous, who stood in front of 200 people dripping with champagne and didn't run. He paused. I've spent my entire life in rooms full of powerful people, Lena, and most of them are cowards. You're not, and that interests me. The honesty in his words struck something deep in Lena's chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the intensity in his dark eyes. But she'd learned young that wanting something didn't make it safe. I need time to think about this. Of course. Victor pulled a card from his pocket and offered it to her. My private number. Call me when you've decided. Or if you need anything before then. Lena took the card, their fingers brushing again. What happens if I say no? If I just go back to my life and pretend none of this happened? Something bleak flickered across Victor's face. Then I'll have Alexei watch your building for a few weeks to make sure Morrison's people don't bother you. And after that, you'll never hear from me again. You just let me go? I don't keep people who don't want to be kept, Lena. His voice was firm. Whatever else I am, I'm not that kind of man. Lena believed him. She shouldn't, had no rational reason to trust anything he said, but something in his absolute certainty made her believe it anyway. I should go, she said. Alexei will drive you wherever you need to be. Lena nodded and started toward the elevator, then paused and looked back. Victor hadn't moved from the windows, his silhouette dark against the bright city beyond. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really defend me last night? The truth. Victor turned to face her fully, and the afternoon light carved shadows across his features. Because I've spent 30 years watching powerful men abuse people who can't fight back. And I decided a long time ago that when I had the power to stop it, I would. He paused. You reminded me why I made that decision. Lena's throat tightened. She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak, and stepped into the elevator. Alexei was waiting in the lobby. He drove her home in silence, but as Lena got out of the car, he spoke quietly. Miss Hart, Mr. Karzan is a good man. In a world that does not reward goodness, he tries anyway. Whatever you decide about him, know that. Lena climbed the stairs to her apartment, her mind spinning. Jamie was home this time, sitting on the couch painting her nails electric blue. There you are, Jamie looked up with bright curiosity. Marcus texted me that you left with some guy in a Mercedes. Please tell me this is connected to last night's complicated situation. Lena collapsed into the armchair across from her roommate. It's so much more complicated than I thought. Start talking, girl. I want every detail. So Lena talked. She told Jamie about the gala, about Bradley and the champagne, about Victor's intervention and the dance. She told her about the text messages and the meeting this afternoon, about Victor's confession and his offer of protection. She didn't mention organized crime or dangerous people or the subtle threat from Morrison's father. Some things were too dangerous to share, even with someone she trusted. When she finished, Jamie was staring at her with wide eyes. Holy shit, Jamie breathed. You've got a billionaire sugar daddy. It's not like that. Lena, honey, he sent his driver to pick you up. He has a penthouse office. He wants to be seen in public with you, to protect you. But Jamie's expression was torn between excitement and concern. This is literally the plot of every romance novel I've ever read. Those are fiction. So is the idea that a guy like that is interested in you for your sparkling personality? Jamie held up her hand when Lena started to protest. I don't mean that as an insult. You're smart and gorgeous and funny. But men with that kind of money don't usually notice waitresses unless they want something. He said I interested him. I'm sure you do, Jamie said gently. But you need to figure out what kind of interest we're talking about here. Does he want a relationship, a companion, someone he can control? The question echoed Lena's own fears. I don't know. Then you need to find out before you get in any deeper. Jamie's expression softened. Look, I'm not saying don't see him. If he's as hot as you're describing and he's got money and he wants to spend it on you, that's not the worst problem to have. But be careful, okay? Guys with power like that, they're used to getting what they want. Make sure you know what you want, too. Lena spent the next 3 days trying to figure out exactly that. She went to work, served coffee, smiled at customers, and tried to return to her normal routine. But normal felt different now. She found herself watching the door of the diner, half expecting Victor to walk in. She jumped every time her phone buzzed, hoping and fearing it might be him. But Victor didn't contact her. True to his word, he was giving her space to decide. On the second day, Mrs. Chen invited her for tea. The elderly woman's apartment was cluttered with memories, photographs of her late husband, delicate porcelain from China, the kind of accumulated life that came from 50 years in the same place. You went to gala, Mrs. Chen said as she poured tea with shaking hands. You have good time. It was eventful. Mrs. Chen's dark eyes were sharp despite her age. You meet someone. It wasn't a question. Lena nodded. Dangerous man? Lena's head snapped up. How did you know? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring into her teacup. I tell you something, Lena. Long time ago, when my husband's still alive, we know family like that. Powerful family. Russian family. Her accent thickened with memory. They help us when we need help. But help come with price. What kind of price? Loyalty. Obligation. Mrs. Chen looked up and her eyes were sad. My husband. He'd do favors for them. Small things at first, then bigger things. He never say no because you don't say no to men like that. And one day, the favors cost more than we could pay. A chill ran down Lena's spine. What happened? He died, Mrs. Chen said simply. Heart attack, doctors say. But I always wonder. She reached across the table and gripped Lena's hand with surprising strength. I give you that invitation because I think you deserve to see beautiful things. Not because I want you to meet dangerous men. You be careful, Lena. Some cages are gold, but they still cages. That night, Lena lay awake staring at her ceiling, Mrs. Chen's words echoing in her mind. She thought about Victor's offer, protection, attention, a glimpse into a world she'd never imagined inhabiting, but she also thought about what Jamie had said, about what she wanted versus what Victor wanted. The problem was, she didn't know what she wanted. Or maybe she did, and it terrified her. She wanted to matter, to be seen, to be someone other than the invisible waitress who served coffee and went home alone to a crumbling apartment. Victor made her feel like she could be that person. But at what cost? On the fourth day, Lena was covering the lunch rush when Bradley Morrison walked into the diner. She recognized him immediately despite the expensive sunglasses and casual clothes clearly meant to help him blend in. He slid into a booth in her section, and Lena's hands trembled as she grabbed a menu. What can I get you? She asked, keeping her voice professional. Bradley removed his sunglasses slowly, and she saw the bruise shadowing his left eye, faded now to yellow and green, but still visible. Coffee. Black. Lena poured it with shaking hands, desperately aware that they were in a public place, and he couldn't do anything to her here. But the memory of champagne hitting her face, the fear in his eyes when Victor had confronted him, made her pulse race. I wanted to apologize, Bradley said quietly when she set the cup down. For the other night. I was drunk and stupid, and I shouldn't have thrown that glass. The apology sounded rehearsed, but there was something genuine in his eyes. Something that looked like fear. Apology accepted, Lena managed. My father wanted me to deliver a message. Bradley's voice dropped lower. He says you should be careful about the company you keep. Men like Victor Karzan, they don't do favors without expecting something in return. Is that a threat? It's advice. Bradley stood, leaving a $100 bill on the table for a $3 cup of coffee. My father deals with men like Karzan all the time. He knows how they operate. They collect people the way normal people collect art. And once you're part of their collection, he trailed off meaningfully. He left before Lena could respond, and she stood frozen in the middle of the diner, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Marcus appeared at her elbow. "You okay? That guy bothering you?" "I'm fine," Lena lied, but she wasn't fine. She was standing in the middle of a war she didn't understand being used as a message between powerful men who saw her as a pawn, not a person. That evening, she pulled out Victor's card and stared at the number embossed in silver ink. Mrs. Chen's warning echoed in her mind. Jamie's concern. Bradley's threat disguised as advice. But she also remembered the way Victor had looked at her. Not like a possession to be collected, but like someone worth protecting. Worth knowing. Maybe that was naive. Maybe she was reading kindness into calculation. Or maybe, for the first time in her life, someone powerful had actually seen her as a person. Lena picked up her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. Victor answered on the second ring. Lena. Just her name, but the way he said it made her breath catch. "I've made my decision," she said. A pause. "And?" "I want to know more about you. About this world you're offering me a glimpse into." Lena's voice was steadier than she felt. "But I have conditions." "I'm listening." "I'm not a possession. I'm not something you get to control or dictate to. If we do this, whatever this is, I need autonomy. I need honesty. And I need to know I can walk away if I decide this isn't what I want." The silence stretched so long that Lena thought the call had dropped. Then Victor spoke, and his voice carried something that sounded like respect. "Those are reasonable conditions. I accept them." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She could hear the smile in his voice. "I told you, Lena, I don't keep people who don't want to be kept." "Then I guess we have a deal." "Have dinner with me tomorrow night," Victor said. "Somewhere public, where you'll feel safe. We can discuss what comes next." "Where?" "There's a restaurant in Soho, Maria. I'll make a reservation for 7. Is that acceptable?" Lena had never heard of Maria, but she could look it up. "That works? I'll send Alexei to pick you up at 6:30. "I can take the subway?" "Lena." Victor's voice was gentle but firm. "Let me do this, please." The please undid her resistance. "Okay, 6:30. "I'm looking forward to it," Victor said quietly. "Sleep well." He ended the call, and Lena sat staring at her phone, wondering if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. Jamie came home an hour later and found Lena researching Maria on her laptop. One look at the menu prices made her eyes go wide. "You're seriously going there?" "Apparently." "Lena, entrees at that place start at $80. "I know." Jamie sat down beside her, studying Lena's face. "You're really doing this, getting involved with mystery billionaire guy. His name is Victor." "Victor the mystery billionaire," Jamie corrected. "Have you Googled him?" Lena had tried. The search had returned surprisingly little. A few mentions in business articles about property acquisitions, a photograph from some charity function 5 years ago, nothing personal or revealing. It was as if Victor Karzan had deliberately scrubbed his digital presence. "There's not much to find," Lena admitted, "which is either really good or really bad." Jamie sighed. "Promise me you'll text me during dinner, just so I know you're okay." "I promise. And if he turns out to be a serial killer, I get to say I told you so at your funeral." Despite everything, Lena laughed. "Deal." The next evening, she spent an hour trying on every piece of clothing she owned before settling on a simple navy dress she'd bought for job interviews. It was the nicest thing in her closet, but looking at herself in the mirror, Lena knew it was nowhere near nice enough for a restaurant like Maria. She was about to change into something else, anything else, when her phone buzzed with a message from Victor. "You'll be perfect. Stop worrying." Lena stared at the text. Had he somehow known she was panicking about what to wear? Or was he just good at reading people? At exactly 6:30, the Mercedes pulled up outside her building. But this time, when Alexei opened the door, Victor was sitting in the back seat. He wore a dark suit that had definitely been tailored to his body, and when he looked up and saw Lena, something warm flickered in his dark eyes. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Lena slid into the car beside him, hyper-aware of the space between them, the expensive leather, the way Victor's presence seemed to fill the entire vehicle. "You didn't have to pick me up personally." "I wanted to." Victor's gaze held hers. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Lena admitted. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Good. So am I. The confession startled her. You're nervous? I haven't had dinner with someone I actually wanted to know in a very long time, Victor said quietly. Most of my meals are business transactions. He gestured between them. This is different. The drive to Soho passed in comfortable silence. Lena watched the city slide past, wondering how her life had gone from serving coffee to riding through Manhattan with a man who made powerful people afraid. Maria was exactly as expensive looking as the internet had promised, all soft lighting and elegant tables and the kind of hushed atmosphere that came with entrees costing triple digits. The maitre d' greeted Victor by name and led them to a private table in the back, partially screened from the rest of the restaurant by frosted glass. For privacy, Victor explained as he held Lena's chair for her, but public enough that you can see we're not alone. Lena appreciated that he'd thought of it, that he was trying to make her feel safe. A waiter appeared with menus and a wine list, and Victor ordered a bottle of something Italian that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. She studied the menu, trying not to visibly react to the prices, and finally settled on the simplest pasta dish she could find. Order what you want, Victor said gently, not what you think you should order. Lena looked up, caught. How did you know? Because you're being careful, trying not to seem greedy or demanding. His eyes were kind. You don't have to do that with me, Lena. If you want the lobster, order the lobster. So she did, along with an appetizer that sounded incredible and a dessert she'd been eyeing. Victor ordered efficiently, and when the waiter left, he leaned back in his chair and studied her with that focused attention that made her feel like the only person in the world. Tell me about yourself, he said. The real story, not the summary. So Lena talked about growing up in Queens with a single mother who worked 2 jobs, about her mother's cancer diagnosis when Lena was 21 and how she dropped out of community college to care for her, about her mother's death and the debt that came after, about working at the diner and sharing an apartment with Jamie and trying to figure out what came next in a life that felt stuck in place. Victor listened without interrupting, his dark eyes never leaving her face, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. You've survived a lot. I've gotten by, Lena corrected. No, Victor's voice was firm. You've survived. There's a difference. Most people with your history would have given up or given in. You didn't. The validation in his words made Lena's throat tight. What about you? What's your real story? Victor's expression shuddered slightly, and Lena thought he might refuse to answer, but then he began to speak, his voice low and controlled. I told you my father ran an empire. What I didn't tell you is what that empire cost. He paused, choosing words carefully. I grew up watching my father hurt people, sometimes because they'd crossed him, sometimes because he needed to send a message, and sometimes just because he could. Victor's jaw tightened. I swore I would never become him, that if I inherited his world, I would do it differently, better. Have you? Lena asked quietly. I've tried. Victor met her eyes. I don't enjoy violence the way he did. I look for solutions that don't require it, but sometimes, he trailed off. Sometimes the world I operate in doesn't offer clean choices, and I've had to make decisions that keep me up at night. The honesty in his confession struck Lena hard. This was a man carrying the weight of his choices, trying to be better than his legacy. She understood that in a way she couldn't fully articulate. Bradley Morrison came to see me, she said, and watched Victor's entire body go still. When? Yesterday. At the diner. Lena recounted the conversation, watching Victor's expression darken with each detail. He said I should be careful about the company I keep. He threatened you. He warned me. Same thing. Victor's voice had gone cold. I'll handle it. How? Victor looked at her for a long moment. Do you really want to know? Lena thought about it. Thought about Mrs. Chen's warning, about Jamie's concern, about the choice she was making by being here. Yes, she said finally. If we're doing this honestly, then I need to know what handling it means. I'll call Morrison's father, Victor said calmly. I'll explain that his son approached you against my explicit wishes. I'll make it clear that any further contact with you will be interpreted as a deliberate provocation, and I'll remind him that provocations require responses. And if he ignores you, he won't. Victor's certainty was absolute. Gregory Morrison is many things, but he's not stupid. He knows what I'm capable of, and he knows I don't make empty threats. Lena should have been frightened, should have stood up and walked out of this restaurant and this man's life. Instead, she felt something that might have been relief. Because for the first time since her mother died, someone was protecting her. Not because they pitied her, but because they'd chosen to. The food arrived, and they ate while the conversation shifted to safer topics. Books, music, the city they both loved. Victor was surprisingly easy to talk to once the tension eased, and Lena found herself laughing at his dry observations about the charity circuit and his complete inability to understand social media. I have people who handle my digital presence, he admitted. I tried Twitter once. It lasted 3 days before I deleted my account. What happened? Someone asked me what I had for breakfast, and I couldn't understand why a stranger would care. His expression was genuinely baffled. Why do people share these details publicly? Lena laughed so hard she nearly choked on her wine. Welcome to the 21st century. As dessert arrived, a chocolate creation that was almost too beautiful to eat, Victor reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was simple, intimate, and it sent electricity up Lena's arm. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For giving me a chance. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. For not running when you probably should have. Lena looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between his expensive watch and her bare wrist, and made a decision. I'm still scared, she admitted, of you, of this world, of what happens next. But I want to see where this goes. Victor's smile was small but genuine, transforming his severe features into something almost warm. Then we'll figure it out together. They left Maria near midnight, and Victor walked her to the Mercedes with his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. As Alexei opened the door, Victor paused. I'd like to see you again. Soon. I'd like that too. Tomorrow? Victor asked. Just for coffee. Somewhere normal. Your choice. The fact that he was offering her control, letting her choose the location and the terms, meant more than he probably realized. There's a cafe near my apartment. Bruno's. 7 a.m. before my shift starts. I'll be there. Victor helped her into the car, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment longer than necessary, and Lena felt the promise in that touch. This was just beginning, for better or worse. As Alexei drove her home through the sleeping city, Lena checked her phone and found a text from Jamie. Still alive? She smiled and typed back, Still alive. I'll tell you everything when I get home. But as the Mercedes pulled up outside her building and Alexei wished her goodnight, Lena realized she wasn't sure she could explain everything. How did you tell someone that you were falling into the orbit of a dangerous man and you weren't sure you wanted to escape? How did you explain that sometimes the cage looked an awful lot like freedom? Victor arrived at Bruno's coffee shop at 6:55 the next morning, which gave Lena exactly 5 minutes of watching him through the window before she had to go outside and face what she'd started. He looked different in the early morning light, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater instead of his usual suits. More human somehow, though the way other customers instinctively gave him space suggested that even in casual clothes, he radiated something that made people nervous. He ordered black coffee and sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, the position of someone who'd learned to always watch the exits. Lena took a breath, pushed through the door, and crossed to his table. Victor looked up, and his expression shifted into something warmer. Good morning, he said, rising to pull out her chair. What can I get you? I work here sometimes, Lena admitted. Bruno gives me shifts when the diner's slow. I can get my own coffee. Humor me. So she told him her usual order, a vanilla latte with extra foam, and watched him walk to the counter. Bruno, a heavy-set Italian man in his 60s, took Victor's order with narrowed eyes and a protective glance at Lena that made her both embarrassed and grateful. When Victor returned with her latte and a blueberry muffin she hadn't asked for, he caught her expression and smiled slightly. The man behind the counter looked like he wanted to interrogate me about my intentions. I thought a muffin might help demonstrate that they're honorable. Are they? Honorable? Victor's smile faded into something more serious. I'm trying to make them be. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning sounds of the coffee shop creating a comfortable buffer around them. Steam rose from Lena's latte in delicate spirals, And outside the window, the city was beginning to wake up. Delivery trucks rumbling past, early commuters hurrying toward the subway. The perpetual motion that never stopped. I did some research last night, Lena said finally, about you. And what did you find? Almost nothing, which is suspicious in itself. She met his eyes. Most people with your kind of money have a digital footprint. Photos, interviews, social media. You're a ghost. I prefer privacy. Or you prefer that people can't learn too much about you. Victor inclined his head, acknowledging the point. Both, perhaps. My father taught me that information is currency, and the less people know about you, the less they can use against you. That sounds like a lonely way to live. It is, Victor agreed quietly, but it's also safe. Lena sipped her latte, studying him over the rim of her cup. So what changed? Why risk letting me in? Victor was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. Because I'm tired of being safe. Because I've spent 8 years building walls to protect myself. And I've realized that walls designed to keep danger out also keep everything else out. He paused, including the possibility of something real. The vulnerability in his words made Lena's chest tight. This was a man who'd learned to armor himself against the world, and he was choosing to lower that armor for her. The trust implicit in that choice was staggering. I'm not sure I know how to be what you need, Lena said honestly. I don't need you to be anything except yourself. Victor reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. That's the point, Lena. Everyone in my world wears masks. They perform, calculate, strategize. You don't do any of that. You're just honest. Honest and broke and completely out of my depth. Honest and brave and willing to take risks that terrify you. His hand closed around hers. Do you know how rare that is? Before Lena could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and felt her stomach drop. A text from Marcus at the diner. Need you to come in early. Jen called out sick. Can you be here in 20? I have to go, Lena said reluctantly. The diner needs me. Victor nodded and stood immediately. I'll drive you. You don't have to. Lena. His voice was gentle but firm. Let me drive you to work. Please. So she did, climbing into the Mercedes that Alexei had waiting around the corner, hyper-aware of Victor beside her in the back seat. The drive to Metro Diner took less than 10 minutes, and when they pulled up outside, Victor caught her hand before she could exit. Have dinner with me again tonight. My place this time. Lena's heart kicked into a faster rhythm. Your place? I want to cook for you, Victor said. Show you something of my life beyond restaurants and offices, but only if you're comfortable with that. Every warning bell in Lena's head was screaming that going to a powerful man's private residence was dangerous, potentially stupid, definitely risky. But she looked into Victor's eyes and saw genuine hope there, genuine desire for her to say yes. What time? She heard herself ask. 7. I'll send Alexei. I can take the subway. Lena. Victor's thumb brushed across her knuckles. I know you can take the subway. You're independent and capable, and you don't need anyone to take care of you, but I want to. Not because I think you're helpless, but because it makes me feel better knowing you're safe. He paused. Can you let me have that? The plea in his voice undid her. Okay. 7. Victor lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and intimate that it sent heat flooding through Lena's body. Then he released her, and she stumbled out of the car on shaking legs. She made it through her shift on autopilot, pouring coffee and taking orders while her mind spun in circles. What was she doing? She barely knew this man. Yes, he was protective and surprisingly vulnerable beneath his dangerous exterior, but that didn't change the fact that he existed in a world of violence and power that she couldn't begin to understand. You okay, kid? Marcus asked during a lull, his tattooed arms crossed over his chest. You've been jumpy all morning. I'm fine. That the same guy who picked you up the other day? Lena nodded. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her with the shrewd awareness of someone who'd seen a lot of life. He treating you right? Yes. He gonna keep treating you right? I think so. You think so, or you know so? Marcus leaned against the counter. Because guys with money and power, sometimes they think they can treat people however they want, and I don't want to see you get hurt. The concern in his gruff voice made Lena's throat tight. I'm being careful. Careful's good. Smart's better. Marcus squeezed her shoulder briefly. You need anything, and I mean anything, you call me, day or night. Got it? Got it. The rest of the day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena went home, showered, and stood in front of her closet having another crisis about what to wear. Everything she owned felt inadequate for dinner at the home of a man who wore custom suits and drove a Mercedes. Finally, Jamie came home and took over, pulling out a simple black dress that Lena had forgotten she owned. This, Jamie said firmly, with your good boots and that silver necklace your mom gave you. Classic, elegant, not trying too hard. What if his place is really fancy and I look completely out of place? Then he should have thought about that before inviting a diner waitress to his probably amazing apartment. Jamie zipped up the back of the dress. Besides, he's seen you in your uniform and a champagne-soaked borrowed dress. If he's still interested, your outfit is not the problem. At exactly 7, Alexei arrived. But this time, Lena paid attention to the route they took, memorizing street names, tracking their direction, north through Manhattan into a neighborhood of pristine brownstones and tree-lined streets that screamed old money. The car pulled up in front of a 4-story townhouse with black iron railings and windows glowing with warm light. Mr. Karzan is expecting you, Alexei said, opening her door. Ring the bell. He will answer. Lena climbed the steps on shaking legs and pressed the doorbell. Chimes echoed inside, and then the door swung open to reveal Victor in dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed in a way she'd never seen him, and the smile that crossed his face when he saw her was genuine and unguarded. Lena, come in. Well, she stepped into a foyer that managed to be both elegant and comfortable. Hardwood floors, a curved staircase leading upward, art on the walls that looked original and expensive. But there were also books stacked on a side table, a jacket thrown over a chair, signs of actual life being lived in this space. Your home is beautiful, Lena said. Thank you. I'll give you a tour after dinner. Victor took her coat, his fingers brushing her shoulders in a touch that felt deliberate. Come. Everything's almost ready. He led her through the house to a kitchen that was clearly designed by someone who actually cooked, professional-grade appliances, a massive island, copper pots hanging from a rack overhead. Something savory was simmering on the stove, and the table was set for 2 with simple white plates and wine glasses. You really did cook, Lena said, surprised despite his promise. I find it relaxing. Victor moved to the stove, stirring something in a pan. My mother taught me before she died. She said a man who couldn't feed himself was a man who'd always be dependent on others, and dependency was weakness. How old were you when she died? 12? Victor's voice was matter-of-fact, but Lena heard the old pain beneath it. Cancer. It was fast. I'm sorry. So am I. He glanced at her. Your mother died of cancer, too. 5 years ago. I was 21. Victor nodded slowly. Then you understand. The way it hollows you out. The way nothing feels solid for years afterward. Yes, Lena whispered. Exactly that. They stood in silence for a moment, connected by shared grief, and Lena felt something shift between them. This wasn't just attraction or curiosity anymore. This was recognition. 2 people who'd survived loss and learned to build walls around the empty spaces. Victor served dinner, chicken in a wine sauce with roasted vegetables and fresh bread that he admitted he'd bought rather than made. They ate at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room, and Lena appreciated the intimacy of it, the normalcy. Tell me about your father, Victor said as they ate. You mentioned he left when you were young. 6 years old. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. My mom said he couldn't handle the responsibility of a family. Lena shrugged, trying to make it casual even though the abandonment still stung. I used to make up stories about him, that he was a spy, or in witness protection, or had amnesia and couldn't remember us. Anything except the truth, which was that he just didn't want to be there. That's his loss, Victor said quietly. And his failure, not yours. The certainty in his voice made something loosen in Lena's chest. Your father stayed. Physically, yes. Emotionally, Victor's jaw tightened. He was present but not available. He saw me as an investment, a legacy to be shaped. I don't think he ever saw me as a person. Is that why you're trying so hard to be different from him? Victor looked at her for a long moment. Yes. And because I saw what he became, paranoid, isolated, trusting no one, he died alone in a hospital room because he'd pushed away everyone who might have cared. He paused. I don't want that to be my ending. Then don't let it be, Lena said. You have a choice. Do I? Victor's expression was bleak. Sometimes I wonder. The world I operate in, Lena, it doesn't reward trust or vulnerability. It punishes them. Every time I've let someone close, they've either betrayed me or I've had to push them away to keep them safe. Which one am I going to be? The question hung in the air between them. Victor set down his fork and reached across the table to take her hand. Neither, he said. If I have anything to say about it. After dinner, Victor gave her the promised tour. The house was 4 stories of understated luxury, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a sitting room with a fireplace, a home office with enough security equipment to suggest he took his privacy very seriously. But the 3rd floor was what caught Lena's attention. It had been converted into a gym on one side and an artist's studio on the other. You paint? Lena asked, staring at the canvases leaning against the walls, abstract pieces in dark colors, violent slashes of paint that suggested rage or pain or both. I used to. When I was younger. Victor stood in the doorway, not entering the room. My mother encouraged it. She said I needed an outlet for everything I couldn't say out loud. Lena moved closer to one of the paintings, all black and red and sharp edges. These are angry. I was angry, for a long time. Victor's voice was quiet. At my father. At the world he brought me into. At myself for not being strong enough to escape it. And now? Now I'm just tired. He met her eyes. Which is why you're dangerous to me, Lena. You make me want things I've convinced myself I can't have. What things? Victor crossed the room in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his dark eyes. Peace. Honesty. Someone who sees me and doesn't flinch. Lena's breath caught. I'm flinching on the inside. But you're still here. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. That takes courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. Victor leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was soft, questioning, a request rather than a demand. Lena's eyes fluttered closed, and she kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast beneath her palms, could taste wine and want on his lips. Victor pulled back after a moment, resting his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment you looked at me across that ballroom. You have excellent self-control. Years of practice. He smiled slightly. But you're making it very difficult to maintain. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, balanced on the edge of something that felt both inevitable and terrifying. Then Lena's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She pulled it out reluctantly and felt her blood run cold. A text from an unknown number. Enjoy your evening with Karzan. Just remember, men like him collect beautiful things until they break them. Ask Mrs. Chen about her husband. Lena's hands started shaking. Victor took the phone gently, read the message, and his entire expression went hard. Morrison, he said, his voice like ice. How did he get my number? Money buys a lot of things, including private information. Victor's jaw was tight with barely controlled rage. This ends now! He pulled out his own phone and dialed a number. Someone answered on the first ring. Gregory, Victor said, his voice dangerously calm. We need to talk. Now. Lena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she saw Victor's expression darken further. I'm not interested in your excuses. Your son contacted Lena again, despite my explicit warning. That makes this a problem between you and me. A pause. No, I don't think we can resolve this over the phone. I'll be at your office in 30 minutes. Have your son there. Another pause, and Victor's voice dropped to something that made Lena's spine tingle. If you value your business relationships and your son's health, you'll make sure he's there. He ended the call and looked at Lena. I need to handle this. What are you going to do? Make it very clear that you're off limits. Victor's eyes were hard. And ensure they understand the consequences of ignoring that boundary. Fear spiked through Lena's chest. Victor, I don't want you to hurt anyone because of me. His expression softened slightly. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm going to have a conversation. A very direct conversation. He cupped her face again. But I need you to understand something, Lena. I won't tolerate threats against you. I can't. If I let this slide, it signals weakness, and weakness invites more aggression. So this is about power, not me. It's about both. Victor's thumb stroked her cheek. You matter to me. Therefore, threats against you are threats against me. That's how my world works. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could handle her own problems, but the truth was, she couldn't. Not against people with Morrison's resources and connections. She needed Victor's protection, whether she liked it or not. Be careful, she said finally. Always. Victor kissed her forehead. Alexei will take you home. I'll call you when this is handled. Can I wait here? I don't know how long this will take, and I don't want you sitting alone worrying. His voice was gentle but firm. Go home. I promise I'll update you. Reluctantly, Lena let Alexei drive her back to Brooklyn. But instead of going upstairs to her apartment, she went to Mrs. Chen's door and knocked. The elderly woman answered in her bathrobe, her expression shifting to concern when she saw Lena's face. What wrong? Can I come in? I need to ask you something. Mrs. Chen ushered her inside, settling Lena on the worn couch with tea she didn't want. The apartment smelled like incense and old memories, and for a moment Lena felt like she was visiting her own grandmother, if she'd had one. Mrs. Chen, you said your husband did favors for a Russian family. Was it the Karzans? The old woman's face went very still. How you know that name? Because I'm involved with Victor Karzan, and someone just sent me a message telling me to ask you about your husband. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long time, staring into her tea. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with old sorrow. My husband, he know Victor's father, Dmitry Karzan. Very dangerous man, very cruel. She looked up, her dark eyes sharp. But Victor, he different. After his father died, Victor come to me. He bring money. He say his father owe us debt, and he want to repay. Lena's breath caught. Victor paid you? Every month for 8 years. Enough to live, to stay in an apartment, to have dignity. Mrs. Chen reached out and gripped Lena's hand. I warned you before because I know this life. I know the danger. But Victor, he try to be better man than his father. That not make him safe, but it make him different. Why didn't you tell me he was helping you? Because I want you to choose with clear eyes. Not because old woman say he good man. Mrs. Chen's grip tightened. But now I tell you, Victor Karzan, he have honor. Rare thing in his world. You understand? Lena nodded slowly, processing this new information. Victor had been supporting Mrs. Chen for 8 years, trying to atone for his father's sins. That wasn't the action of a man who saw people as possessions to be collected and discarded. She stayed with Mrs. Chen for another hour, listening to stories about Dmitry Karzan's cruelty and the relief when he died, about Victor's quiet visit and the trust fund he'd established, about the difference between a man who chose violence and a man who used it only when necessary. When Lena finally returned to her own apartment, Jamie was waiting up. Mystery man didn't drive you home himself? He had business to handle. What kind of business? Lena sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. The kind where he makes sure people who threaten me understand that's a bad idea. Jamie's eyes widened. Someone threatened you? So Lena explained about the text message, about Victor's phone call to Morrison, about the conversation she'd just had with Mrs. Chen. Jamie listened with growing alarm. Okay, so let me get this straight, Jamie said when Lena finished. You're dating a guy who's basically a mob boss. Someone from his world is harassing you, and instead of running screaming in the other direction, you're, what, letting him handle it? I don't know what else to do, Lena admitted. I can't fight these people, Jamie. I don't have the resources or the knowledge or the power. Victor does. So you're letting yourself become dependent on him. Maybe, Lena met her roommate's worried gaze. Or maybe I'm accepting help from someone who wants to give it. Is that so wrong? It is if the price is your freedom. The words echoed Mrs. Chen's warning about golden cages, and Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Was that what she was doing? Trading her independence for protection? Becoming the kind of woman who needed a powerful man to solve her problems? Her phone rang before she could spiral further into that thought. Victor's name flashed on the screen. It's handled, he said without preamble when she answered. Morrison has agreed to leave you alone, and his son will be making no further contact. I've also arranged for some additional security measures for your building. What kind of security measures? Nothing intrusive, just cameras at the entrances and a patrol that will pass by a few times each night. Victor paused. I know you value your independence, Lena, but please let me do this. It will help me sleep better. Lena thought about arguing, about insisting she didn't need surveillance and protection. But the truth was the text message had scared her, and knowing that someone was watching out for her building, for Mrs. Chen and the other residents, didn't feel like weakness. It felt like relief. Okay, she said. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. Victor's voice softened. I'm sorry our evening was interrupted. It's not your fault. Isn't it? He sounded tired. This is what being with me means, Lena. People will use you to get to me. They'll see you as leverage or a weakness. I can protect you from most of it, but I can't make it go away entirely. Are you trying to scare me off? I'm trying to be honest with you. A pause. Are you scared off? Lena thought about it, really thought about it, about the danger and the complications and the way her life had become infinitely more complex in the span of a week. But she also thought about the way Victor looked at her, the vulnerability he showed her, the man beneath the armor. No, she said finally. Not yet. She heard Victor exhale, a sound of relief. Then have breakfast with me tomorrow. Somewhere public again, if that makes you more comfortable. The diner, Lena said impulsively. Come to Metro Diner at 9. Meet the people in my world. The invitation felt significant somehow, like she was testing whether Victor could exist in her space the way she'd been trying to exist in his. There was a long pause before he answered. I'd like that. I'll see you at 9. After hanging up, Lena found Jamie watching her with a mixture of concern and resignation. You're really doing this, Jamie said, getting in deep with this guy. I think I'm already in deep. Yeah, Jamie sighed. I think you are too. Just promise me something? What? Promise me you won't lose yourself in him. That you'll remember who you are and what you want, separate from what he wants. Jamie's expression was serious, because guys like that, they're used to people bending to their will. Don't let him reshape you into something you're not. The warning settled into Lena's chest alongside all the others she'd received, but she nodded, understanding that Jamie was scared for her, wanting to protect her the way Victor wanted to protect her, just with fewer resources and more genuine friendship. I promise, Lena said. I'll try. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in her mind. Victor's kiss. The text message. The phone call. Mrs. Chen's revelation about 8 years of quiet atonement. Jamie's warning about losing herself. Her phone buzzed with a final message from Victor. Sleep well, Lena. Thank you for trusting me with your evening, even when it didn't go as planned. She typed back. Thank you for being honest. See you tomorrow. His response was immediate. I'm looking forward to it. Lena set her phone aside and closed her eyes, but sleep was a long time coming, because she was standing at a crossroads now, and she knew it. She could walk away from Victor and return to her safe, invisible life. Or she could step forward into uncertainty and danger and the terrifying possibility of something real with a man who made her feel seen for the first time in her life. The smart choice was obvious. The safe choice was clear. But Lena had never been particularly good at doing what was smart or safe. And as she finally drifted towards sleep, she found herself already planning what to wear to the diner tomorrow, already imagining Victor sitting in one of the cracked vinyl booths, already choosing to step forward instead of back. Mrs. Chen had said Victor had honor. Jamie had said not to lose herself. Marcus had said to call if she needed anything. And Victor had promised to be honest, to respect her autonomy, to try. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Because Lena was beginning to realize that the real danger wasn't Victor or his world or the threats that came with being connected to him. The real danger was how much she was starting to want this. The attention, the protection, the feeling of mattering to someone powerful enough to reshape the world around her. The real danger was that she might already be falling for a man who lived in shadows and spoke in threats and kissed her like she was something precious instead of something breakable. And tomorrow, when he walked into Metro Diner and met the people in her world, she would find out if what they were building could survive the light of day. If Victor Karzan could be both the man who terrified Manhattan's elite and the man who wanted to cook her dinner in his kitchen. If she could be both the independent woman she'd always been and the woman who accepted help when she needed it. If they could find some kind of balance between his world and hers, between protection and freedom, between the cage and the key. Tomorrow would tell her a lot. But tonight, she let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, this dangerous thing she was doing might turn into something worth the risk. Victor arrived at Metro Diner at exactly 9 o'clock, stepping through the door like he owned the place, even though he clearly didn't belong there. The Mercedes idled at the curb with Alexei behind the wheel, and every head in the restaurant turned to watch as Victor scanned the room and found Lena refilling coffee at the counter. She'd been half expecting him not to show. Men like Victor didn't eat at diners with cracked vinyl booths and laminate tables. But here he was, wearing dark slacks and a gray sweater that probably cost more than the diner's entire month of coffee sales, looking completely out of place and apparently unbothered by that fact. Marcus appeared at Lena's elbow, his tattooed arms crossed over his chest. That him? Yes. He looks like a Fed, or a hitman. Marcus studied Victor with the sharp awareness of someone who'd seen his share of dangerous men. Which one is he? Neither. Both. I'm not sure. Lena set down the coffee pot. Be nice. I'm always nice. Right up until I'm not. Victor approached the counter, his dark eyes moving from Lena to Marcus with the kind of assessment that suggested he was cataloging potential threats. Good morning. Morning, Marcus said, not moving. I'm Marcus. I cook here, and I look out for Lena. Victor Karzan. Victor extended his hand without hesitation. I appreciate that someone's looking out for her. Marcus shook his hand, and Lena saw the brief flex of muscles as each man tested the other's grip. Some kind of masculine evaluation that ended with Marcus giving a small nod. Coffee? Lena asked, breaking the tension. Please. Victor slid onto a stool at the counter rather than taking a booth, positioning himself where he could see both the door and Lena. And whatever you recommend for breakfast. You trust me to order for you? I trust you with considerably more than that, Victor said quietly, and the intimacy in his voice made heat flood Lena's cheeks. She ordered him the house special, eggs, hash browns, bacon, toast, and poured his coffee black the way he'd taken it at Bruno's. Other customers were still staring, whispered conversations rippling through the diner. Lena could practically hear the speculation. Who was this man? What was he doing here? What did he want with their Lena? You're causing a scene, she murmured as she set his coffee down. People stare at me everywhere. I've learned to ignore it. Victor wrapped his hands around the mug. Tell me about this place. How long have you worked here? 4 years, since right after my mom died. Lena leaned against the counter, grateful for the lunch rush not having started yet. It's not much, but the tips are decent and Marcus keeps the creeps in line. Damn right I do, Marcus called from the kitchen. Victor's mouth quirked into something that might have been a smile. He seems protective. He is. This whole place is kind of like that. A family. Lena gestured around the diner at the regulars settling into their usual spots. That's Mr. Patterson at the corner booth. He's been coming here for breakfast every day for 20 years. The woman by the window is Sarah. She's a nurse at Bellevue, works night shifts. The couple at table 4 just got engaged last week. Victor listened with focused attention, his eyes following where she pointed. You know all your customers. Most of them. They're not just customers, they're people. Lena refilled Mr. Patterson's coffee without him having to ask. That's the difference between this place and those fancy restaurants you probably usually eat at. Here, people matter as people, not just as revenue. You think I don't see people as people? Lena met his eyes. I think you see them as assets or threats, categories. This place doesn't work like that. Victor was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. I do categorize people. It's a survival mechanism. He paused. Teach me not to, at least here. The request was so genuine, so vulnerable, that Lena felt something soften in her chest. Okay. Mr. Patterson over there, what do you see when you look at him? Victor glanced at the elderly man in the corner booth. Late 70s, probably retired, lives alone based on the way he's reading the paper like it's his only companion. He wears a wedding ring, but there's no wife, so either divorced or widowed. Widowed? 3 years ago. Her name was Dorothy, and they were married for 52 years. Lena's voice was gentle. He comes here because the apartment is too quiet, and the waitresses remind him of his daughter, who moved to California. Last month, he told me that our coffee isn't as good as Dorothy's, but it's close enough to feel like home. Victor's expression shifted, something softening around his eyes. I would have missed all of that. Because you're looking at the surface. But the surface isn't where people live. Lena moved to deliver Marcus's breakfast special to table 6, then returned to the counter. Sarah, the nurse, she just got custody of her niece because her sister's in rehab. She's exhausted all the time, but she still tips 20% and asks about my day. And the engaged couple? They've been coming here for their anniversary breakfast for 3 years because this is where they had their first date. How do you know all this? Because I listen, and because I care. Lena poured herself a cup of coffee and stood across the counter from Victor. That's what this place is. It's where people come to be seen and heard and treated like they matter, even if they're nobody important. Everyone's important, Victor said quietly. I just forgot that for a while. Marcus appeared with Victor's breakfast, sliding the plate across the counter with deliberate care. How special? You don't like it. You can say so. We don't do fake politeness here. Victor cut into his eggs, took a bite, and nodded. It's excellent. Thank you. Huh. Marcus looked surprised. You're welcome. As Marcus returned to the kitchen, Lena watched Victor eat with the focused attention he seemed to bring to everything. He didn't check his phone, didn't scan the room nervously, just ate breakfast like it was something worth his full attention. This is good, he said after a few bites. Simple but well prepared. Marcus used to be a line cook at a Michelin-starred restaurant. He could work anywhere, but he likes it here. Says corporate kitchens have no soul. He's not wrong. Victor took another bite. I eat at expensive restaurants because they're where business happens. But I can't remember the last time I actually enjoyed a meal the way I'm enjoying this one. Because it's about more than the food, Lena said. It's about the place and the people and the feeling that you're welcome here. Victor looked around the diner, really looked, the way Lena had taught him to. She saw his gaze linger on Mr. Patterson, on Sarah the exhausted nurse, on the engaged couple sharing a stack of pancakes. And she saw something shift in his expression, some hardness easing into something more open. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For sharing this with me, for showing me something real. Victor met her eyes. I forget sometimes that not everything is a transaction or a power play, that some things can just be good. Before Lena could respond, the door chimed, and 3 men walked in wearing expensive suits and carrying themselves with the kind of swagger that suggested they thought they owned every room they entered. Lena didn't recognize them, but she saw Victor's entire body go tense. Friends of yours? She asked quietly. Associates of Morrison's? Victor's voice was flat. This isn't a coincidence. The 3 men slid into a booth directly in Lena's section, their eyes fixed on Victor with barely concealed hostility. Lena grabbed menus and approached their table, her heart hammering. Morning, coffee? Sure, sweetheart, the largest one said, his smile not reaching his eyes. And tell your boyfriend we'd like a word when he's done with his breakfast. I don't speak for him. No? The man leaned back, deliberately invading her space. That's funny, because Morrison said you two were real close. Said Carzon's been making threats over you. Lena felt her face flush. I don't know anything about that. Of course you don't. The second man, slimmer, with cold blue eyes, smiled unpleasantly. You're just the girl. The leverage. You never know anything until it's too late. Victor was off his stool and crossing the diner before Lena could blink. He didn't rush, didn't show any outward aggression, but every person in the restaurant went quiet as he approached the booth. Gentlemen, Victor said, his voice dangerously calm, I believe you have me confused with someone who negotiates in public places where innocent people could be affected. We're just here for breakfast, the largest man said, but his hand had moved to his jacket in a way that suggested a weapon. Then order breakfast and leave quietly when you're done. Victor's eyes were black with controlled rage. But if you think using Lena or this establishment to send Morrison a message is acceptable, I'll make sure you deeply regret that calculation. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Victor's voice dropped even lower. I ended our business with Morrison cleanly. He accepted my terms. If he sent you here to intimidate me through her, tell him he's made a catastrophic error in judgment. Marcus had emerged from the kitchen, a large knife still in his hand from prep work. Sarah the nurse had her phone out, probably ready to call 911. Mr. Patterson had stood up, his elderly hand steady despite his age. The entire diner had shifted into protective mode around Lena and Victor, and the three men seemed to realize they'd miscalculated badly. "We're just here for coffee," the slim one said, his bravado fading. "No trouble." "Then have your coffee and go." Victor didn't move. "And tell Morrison that if he wants to discuss our arrangement further, he can call my office, like a professional." The three men stood, threw some bills on the table, and left without ordering anything. The Mercedes was still at the curb, and Lena saw Alexei watching the men with the cold focus of a predator tracking prey. Whatever had just happened, it was now on record in multiple ways. Victor returned to the counter, his hands shaking slightly, the only sign that the confrontation had affected him. Lena poured him fresh coffee without being asked. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I brought that to your workplace." "You also handled it without anyone getting hurt." Lena glanced around the diner where normal conversation was slowly resuming. "Are they going to come back?" "No, they were testing boundaries, seeing if I'd react publicly or try to hide my association with you." Victor's jaw was tight. "I made it clear that neither hiding nor backing down is an option." Marcus appeared again, still holding his knife. "Those guys friends of Morrison?" "Associates," Victor confirmed. "Huh. Well, they're not welcome here anymore." Marcus pointed the knife at Victor with casual menace. "And you're going to make sure they know that, right?" "Absolutely." "Good." Marcus returned to the kitchen, apparently satisfied that Victor would handle it. Lena exhaled slowly, her adrenaline still spiking. "This is what it's like, isn't it? Being with you. Always looking over your shoulder, always wondering who's watching or planning something." "Yes," Victor said honestly. "It gets easier with practice, but it never completely goes away." He reached across the counter and took her hand. "I understand if that's too much. If you want to walk away from this, I'll make sure you're safe, but left alone. No strings, no obligations." It was the second time he'd offered her an exit, and Lena knew he meant it. Victor might be many things, but he wasn't someone who forced people to stay. The choice was genuinely hers. She looked around the diner, at Marcus watching from the kitchen, at Mr. Patterson, who'd stood up ready to help despite being in his 70s, at Sarah and the engaged couple and all the regular customers who'd shifted into protective mode without hesitation. This was her world, her people, her safe place. But when she looked at Victor, she saw someone who'd walked into that world and tried to understand it, who'd listened when she explained about Mr. Patterson and Dorothy, who'd thanked Marcus for the food, who'd defended her and this place from men who thought they could use it as a battlefield. "I'm not walking away," Lena said, "but we need to set some boundaries." Victor's eyes searched her face. "I'm listening." "This place is off limits. The diner, my building, anywhere the people I care about spend time. If someone wants to send you messages or test you or whatever, they do it on your territory, not mine." "Agreed." "And you have to tell me when something's happening. No hiding threats or danger because you think I can't handle it. I need to know what I'm walking into." "That's fair." Victor's thumb stroked across her knuckles. "Anything else?" Lena took a breath. "Yeah. I need you to understand that I'm not giving up my life to fit into yours. I'm still going to work here and live in my apartment and be friends with Jamie and Mrs. Chen. You can be part of that world, but you don't get to replace it." "I don't want to replace it," Victor said quietly. "I want to be added to it. There's a difference." The distinction mattered more than Lena could articulate. She nodded slowly. "Okay, then we keep going." "You're sure?" "No," Lena admitted, "but I want to try anyway." Victor lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture that felt intimate and possessive and tender all at once. "Then we'll figure it out together." The rest of Victor's breakfast passed without incident, though Lena noticed he kept one eye on the door and his phone buzzed several times with messages he glanced at but didn't answer. When he finally settled his bill, leaving a tip that was probably 3 times the cost of the meal, Marcus emerged from the kitchen one more time. "You come back any time," Marcus said gruffly, "but maybe call first so I can make sure we don't have any other visitors." Victor nodded, understanding the offer for what it was. Protection extended from Lena's world to include him. "Thank you, I appreciate that." Outside, Alexei had moved the Mercedes closer to the door. Victor walked Lena out, his hand resting at the small of her back in a touch that was both protective and possessive. "I have meetings all day," he said, "but I'd like to see you tonight. My place again, if you're comfortable with that. What time? 7. I'll send Alexei. Victor. Lena turned to face him. What happened in there? Morrison sending those guys. Is that going to keep happening? Victor was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Morrison is testing boundaries because I've never publicly claimed someone before. He's trying to determine if you're actually important to me or if I was just being chivalrous at the gala. He paused. I need to make a statement that removes any doubt. What kind of statement? The kind where I take you to a very public, very visible event where everyone in my world will see us together. Victor's eyes were serious. There's a charity auction tomorrow night, the kind where the city's elite gather to show off their wealth. I'd like you to come with me, as my guest. Lena's stomach flipped. That sounds terrifying. It will be. They'll stare, they'll speculate, they'll probably be rude. Victor cupped her face gently. But it will also establish that you're under my protection. That touching you means going through me, and after tomorrow night, Morrison and everyone else will know better than to try. So I'm bait. You're a statement. Victor's voice was firm. There's a difference. Bait is meant to lure danger. A statement prevents it. Lena understood the logic, even as fear coiled in her stomach. What if I mess up? Say the wrong thing, or use the wrong fork, or embarrass you? Then you mess up. I don't care about forks or etiquette, Lena. I care about you. He paused. But if this is too much too fast, we can find another way. Lena thought about it, about standing in a room full of people like Bradley Morrison, being judged and assessed and probably insulted. But she also thought about what Jamie had said about not losing herself, about Mrs. Chen's warning about cages, about her own promise to maintain her autonomy. I'll go, she said finally. But on one condition. Name it. Afterward, we go somewhere normal, not another fancy restaurant or your townhouse, somewhere regular where I feel like myself. Deal? Victor smiled, a real smile that transformed his severe features. Deal. Where did you have in mind? There's a bar in Brooklyn that does karaoke on Saturday nights. It's loud and terrible and completely unpretentious. Perfect. Victor kissed her forehead. I'll pick you up at 6 tomorrow evening. Wear something you feel confident in. We can buy a dress if you need one. I'm not letting you buy me clothes. It's not about the money, Lena. It's about you having armor. Victor's voice was gentle. In my world, clothes are communication. They tell people how seriously to take you. I want you to have every advantage. Put that way, it made more sense. Not a gift, but a tool. Okay, but nothing that makes me look like someone I'm not. I wouldn't dream of it. Victor checked his phone. I really do need to go, but I'll see you tonight? Tonight, Lena confirmed. She watched the Mercedes pull away, then returned to the diner where Marcus was waiting with crossed arms and a knowing expression. You're in deep with that guy. I know. He dangerous? Yes. But he treats you right? Lena thought about the question carefully. He's trying to, and I think that might be the best I can hope for from someone in his position. Marcus grunted. Fair enough, but the offer stands. You need anything, you call me, day or night. The rest of Lena's shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and lunch orders, but her mind kept drifting to tomorrow night, to the auction and the statement and the feeling that she was about to step onto a stage she'd never auditioned for. When she got home that evening, she found Jamie sitting on the couch with shopping bags at her feet. Okay, so I may have done something, Jamie said, looking guilty and excited in equal measure. I called in a favor from my friend who works at Bloomingdale's, and I got you an appointment with a personal shopper tomorrow at 2 for the auction. Lena stared at her. How did you know about the auction? Victor called me. He said he wanted to make sure you had support and asked if I could help you find something to wear. Jamie held up her hands. I know. You don't want him buying you things. But he's not buying anything. I am. Well, we are. Using the money I've been saving for a new laptop. Consider it an investment in your future as a mob wife. I'm not... Lena. Honey, you're dating a man who sends armed drivers and makes people leave diners with a look. You're absolutely on the path to mob wife status. Jamie's expression softened. But you're my best friend. And if you're going to walk into a room full of sharks, I want you to look so good they can't even think about taking a bite. Lena felt her eyes sting with tears. You don't have to spend your laptop money on me. Yes, I do. Because you do it for me. Jamie stood and pulled Lena into a hug. Besides, I want to see you walk into that auction and blow everyone away, including your scary boyfriend. That night, Victor called at exactly 7. How was the rest of your day? He asked. Surreal. Jamie's taking me shopping tomorrow. I know. She texted me 3 different store options before settling on Bloomingdale's. Victor sounded amused. She's very protective of you. She's my best friend. I'm glad you have her. A pause. I wanted to tell you about tomorrow night. The auction is for children's cancer research. It's one of the few charity events I actually care about. But the real purpose is networking and posturing. People will ask invasive questions. They'll try to determine your net worth, your background, your value. And some of them will be cruel about it. Lena's stomach tightened. You're really selling this. I'm preparing you. Victor's voice was serious. I won't let them hurt you, Lena, but I also can't prevent them from trying. You need to know what you're walking into. Tell me how to handle it. So Victor spent the next hour coaching her through potential scenarios. How to deflect personal questions with polite vagueness. How to smile through insults without letting them land. How to use silence as a weapon when words failed. He was patient and thorough, and by the time they hung up, Lena felt slightly less terrified. The next afternoon, Jamie dragged her to Bloomingdale's, where a woman named Gabriella greeted them with professional warmth and an armful of dresses. Lena tried on what felt like 50 options, sequins and silk and fabric so delicate she was afraid to breathe near them. No, Jamie said to a red dress that made Lena look like she was trying too hard. No, to a black gown that washed her out. Definitely no, to something with feathers that belonged at a Vegas show. Finally, Gabriella emerged with a dress in deep midnight blue, simple but elegant with clean lines and a cut that suggested confidence without desperation. This one, Gabriella said. Trust me. Lena slipped it on and stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was someone she recognized, but also someone new, poised, elegant, self-possessed. The dress didn't make her look rich or pretentious. It made her look like herself, just elevated. That's the one, Jamie breathed. Victor's gonna lose his mind. They bought the dress along with simple heels and a small clutch, and Jamie refused to let Lena see the receipt. Don't even think about it. This is my gift to you. That evening, Lena stood in front of her bathroom mirror practicing Victor's coaching. Smile politely, deflect smoothly. Never let them see you flinch. She felt like an actor preparing for a role, except the role was her own life, and the stakes were real. When she arrived at Victor's townhouse at 7, he opened the door and went very still. You look... He seemed to lose words, which Lena had never seen happen before. Incredible. Jamie helped. Remind me to thank her. Victor stepped back to let her inside. Come in. I have something for you. He led her to the sitting room, where a small velvet box sat on the table. Lena's heart jumped. It's not what you think, Victor said quickly, reading her expression. Open it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a key. Lena lifted it out carefully, confused. You said you didn't want to be in a cage, Victor explained quietly. So I'm giving you the key. It's a reminder that you can always leave. That I chose you, but you also chose me. And that choice remains yours. He took the bracelet and fastened it around her wrist. And selfishly, I want you to have something of mine with you tomorrow night. So when people ask questions and make assumptions, you can look at this and remember that you're not there because I'm forcing you. You're there because you decided I was worth the risk. Lena stared at the bracelet, her throat tight with emotion. Victor, you don't have to say anything. He kissed her wrist just above the bracelet. I just needed you to know. They had dinner. Victor had cooked again, something with pasta and wine that Lena barely tasted because her mind was already on tomorrow. Afterward, they sat on his couch and Victor walked her through the guest list, pointing out who to avoid and who might actually be kind. Patricia Holloway will be there. You met her at the first gala. She's safe. Malcolm Chen runs a tech company and is generally decent. Stay away from anyone named Whitmore. They're Morrison's cousins and will absolutely try to embarrass you. Victor pulled up photos on his phone. This woman is Constance Markham. She'll ask how you and I met, and she'll try to imply you're a gold digger. Don't engage, just smile and change the subject. What if I can't remember all of this? Then stay close to me. I'll run interference. Victor set his phone aside and pulled Lena against him. You're going to be fine. Better than fine. You're going to walk in there and show them exactly what they've been underestimating. Lena rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I'm scared. I know. But fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is being scared and doing it anyway. He stroked her hair gently. And you're the bravest person I've met in a very long time. They sat like that for a while, and Lena let herself absorb his certainty, his calm. Tomorrow she would need to be strong and poised and unshakable. But tonight, she let herself be held by a man who saw her fear and valued her anyway. Stay, Victor said quietly. Tonight. Not just to sleep. So you're not alone with your thoughts. Lena knew she should say no, should maintain some distance, some boundary. But the thought of going back to her empty apartment and lying awake all night imagining tomorrow's disasters was unbearable. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Victor showed her to a guest room, elegant but comfortable, with soft sheets and windows overlooking the garden. He brought her pajamas that were clearly his, a t-shirt and sweatpants that smelled like him, and kissed her forehead goodnight. If you need anything, I'm right down the hall. But an hour later, when Lena still couldn't sleep, she found herself padding down the hallway to Victor's room. She knocked softly, and he answered immediately, like he'd been awake too. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. Victor pulled her inside without hesitation, and they climbed into his bed fully clothed. He held her close, one arm wrapped around her waist, and Lena felt some of her tension ease. Tell me something, she said into the darkness. Something real. Victor was quiet for a long moment. I'm terrified of tomorrow too. Not of the event or the people. Of losing you because I brought you into a world that breaks you. You won't lose me. You can't know that. Neither can you. Lena turned in his arms to face him. But we can choose to try anyway. That's what courage is, right? Victor's smile was small and sad and genuine, using my own words against me. I learned from the best. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of everything they hadn't said out loud yet. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together, Lena felt something settle in her chest. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through Victor's bedroom windows and pulling Lena from a sleep that had been surprisingly deep. She woke to find Victor already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. How long have you been awake? She asked, her voice rough with sleep. An hour, maybe. I don't sleep much. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. But I like watching you sleep. You look peaceful. That's slightly creepy. Probably, Victor smiled. But I'm not giving up the opportunity. They had breakfast together in his kitchen, coffee and toast, and the kind of comfortable silence that came from genuine ease rather than awkwardness. Lena wore his t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair a mess, her face free of makeup, and Victor looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. I need to go home and get ready, Lena said finally, checking the time. The auction's in 9 hours, and I need approximately 8 of them to stop panicking. You're going to be extraordinary, Victor said. But yes, go, prepare. I'll pick you up at 6. Alexei drove her back to Brooklyn, and Lena spent the day in a fog of anxiety and preparation. Jamie helped her with her hair and makeup, keeping up a steady stream of encouragement that mostly washed over Lena without landing. Stop spiraling, Jamie said finally, grabbing Lena's shoulders. You're going to walk in there on the arm of the most powerful man in the room. You're going to look gorgeous, and you're going to make every single person who ever dismissed you regret it. What if I freeze? What if I say something stupid? Then Victor will handle it. That's literally what he does. Handle problems. Jamie's expression softened. You're not alone in this, Lena. You've got him, you've got me, you've got Marcus and Mrs. Chen, and everyone who loves you. We're all rooting for you. At exactly 6, the Mercedes pulled up outside Lena's building. But this time, Victor emerged from the back seat himself, wearing a tuxedo that had definitely been tailored to his exact measurements. He looked devastating, all sharp lines and contained power, and when he saw Lena in her midnight blue dress, his expression shifted into something that looked like awe. Lena, he breathed. You're perfect. I'm terrified. Good. Use it. He extended his hand. Ready? She placed her hand in his, felt his fingers close around hers with steady certainty, and nodded. Ready. The auction was being held at the Plaza Hotel in a ballroom that made the Rothmore look modest. Crystal chandeliers dripped from ceilings painted with gold leaf. And everywhere Lena looked, she saw wealth, designer gowns, million-dollar jewelry, the kind of casual extravagance that came from never having worried about money. Victor's hand stayed at the small of her back as they entered, a constant reassuring presence. Heads turned immediately, conversations pausing mid-sentence as people registered Victor's arrival with a woman no one recognized. Here we go, Victor murmured. Remember, you belong here because I want you here. That's the only credential that matters. Patricia Holloway appeared almost immediately, her kind face breaking into a genuine smile. Victor, and Lena, how wonderful to see you again. She kissed Lena's cheek with real warmth. That dress is stunning. You look like you belong on a magazine cover. Thank you, Lena managed, grateful for the friendly face. I'll leave you two to make the rounds, Patricia said, squeezing Lena's hand briefly. But find me later. I want to hear all about how you two reconnected after the Rothmore Gala. As Patricia drifted away, Victor guided Lena deeper into the room, introducing her to a steady stream of people whose names Lena immediately forgot. She smiled, shook hands, deflected personal questions the way Victor had taught her, and tried to ignore the calculating looks and whispered speculation that followed them. Malcolm Chen, the tech executive Victor had mentioned, was genuinely pleasant, asking about Lena's interests rather than her background. But others were less kind. Constance Markham cornered them near the bar with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Victor, darling, I didn't know you were seeing anyone. Constance's gaze swept over Lena with barely concealed disdain. And where did you two meet? I don't believe I've seen you at any of our usual events, dear. We met at a charity gala, Lena said calmly, using Victor's coaching. The one supporting children's hospitals. How charitable of you to attend. Constance's tone suggested she didn't believe it. And what is it you do, Lena? I work in food service. Oh. Constance's expression shifted to something pitying. How industrious. Victor, you always do have the most interesting companions. Victor's hand tightened at Lena's waist, and his voice went cold. Constance, I'd appreciate it if you spoke to Lena with the same respect you show to everyone else in this room, or as basic courtesy beyond your capabilities. Constance's face flushed. I didn't mean any offense. Yes, you did. Victor's smile was sharp. But I'll give you the opportunity to apologize and walk away gracefully. I apologize, Constance stammered, looking at Lena with wide eyes. I spoke out of turn. Apology accepted, Lena said, channeling every lesson Victor had taught her. Enjoy your evening. Constance fled, and Victor turned to Lena with concern. Are you all right? I'm fine. Is it going to be like that all night? Probably, but you handled it perfectly. Well, Victor's expression was proud. And now everyone watching knows that insulting you means answering to me. They were approached by several more people, some curious, some hostile, a few genuinely friendly. Lena fell into a rhythm of polite deflection and careful responses, and with each interaction she felt herself relaxing slightly. She could do this. She was doing this. Then Bradley Morrison appeared with his father, Gregory, and everything got complicated. Tarzan, Gregory Morrison said, extending his hand with a politician's smile. Good to see you, and this must be the young lady who's caused such a stir. Victor shook his hand with calculated politeness. Lena Hart, Gregory Morrison, and his son Bradley. I believe you've met Bradley before. Bradley's face was carefully neutral, but Lena saw the fear in his eyes when he looked at Victor. Miss Hart, I hope there are no hard feelings about our previous encounter. Oh, water under the bridge, Lena said, though her heart was racing. I'm glad to hear it. Gregory's smile widened. Victor, I was hoping we could discuss that matter we spoke about. Perhaps in private? I think we've said everything that needs to be said, Victor replied evenly. Unless there's been a change in our arrangement? No change. Just a clarification. Gregory glanced at Lena. Would you excuse us for a moment, dear? Business talk, I'm afraid. Lena started to step away, but Victor's hand stayed firm at her waist. Anything you need to say to me can be said in front of Lena. We don't keep secrets. The statement landed like a bomb in the conversation. Gregory's smile faltered, and Bradley shifted uncomfortably. Around them, Lena could feel people listening, watching, waiting to see how this played out. "Very well," Gregory said carefully. "I wanted to ensure that our understanding remains clear. My associates who visited Metro Diner were acting without my knowledge or consent. I've made it clear to them that Miss Hart is not to be contacted or approached in any way." "Good," Victor said. "Then we have no further business to discuss." "Actually, we might." Gregory's expression hardened slightly. "There's been talk, Victor, about you getting distracted. Letting personal entanglements affect your professional judgment. Some of your partners are concerned." "My partners can voice their concerns directly if they have them," Victor said coldly. "And my personal life is none of their business, or yours. Everything that affects your decision-making is our business." Gregory leaned in slightly. "We've built an empire together, Victor. Don't let a girl destroy what took decades to create." Victor's entire body went tense, and Lena saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "Careful, Gregory. You're about 3 words away from discovering what happens when you insult someone I care about." "Is that a threat?" "It's a boundary." Victor's voice dropped to something that made the hair on Lena's arms stand up. "I've been patient with you because I understand the adjustment period. But let me be absolutely clear. Lena is not a distraction or an entanglement. She's important to me. And anyone who tries to use her against me or hurt her to make a point will discover that my patience has very definite limits." Gregory stared at Victor for a long moment, and Lena saw the calculation in his eyes. He was assessing whether to push back or retreat, weighing the costs of each option. "I understand," Gregory said finally. "No disrespect intended." "Then none taken." Victor nodded curtly. "Enjoy your evening." The Morrisons retreated, and Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That was intense." "That was necessary." Victor guided her toward the terrace doors. "You need air. Come on." They stepped outside onto a balcony overlooking Central Park, the cool October air a relief after the stifling tension of the ballroom. Lena gripped the railing, her hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry," Victor said quietly. "I didn't expect Morrison to be that direct." "You defended me." "Of course I did." Victor turned her to face him. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought you might try to smooth things over, keep the peace for business reasons." "Lena." Victor cupped her face in his hands. "I've spent 8 years prioritizing business over everything else, building relationships, making compromises, putting profit ahead of principles." He paused. "But I meant what I said in there. You're important to me. More important than Morrison's approval or any business arrangement. If people can't accept that, then I'll find new people to work with." "That's a huge risk." "You're worth it." His voice was absolutely certain. "And maybe it's time I started choosing people over profit anyway." Before Lena could respond, the terrace doors opened and a woman in her 60s stepped out. She wore an elegant emerald gown and moved with the kind of grace that suggested old money and genuine class. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice cultured but kind. "But I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Rothschild." Victor straightened immediately. "Mrs. Rothschild, it's an honor." "Oh, please, Victor. We've known each other for years. No need for formality." Elizabeth turned to Lena with warm eyes. "And you must be the young lady causing such a sensation. I'm delighted to meet you." "Lena Hart," Lena said, shaking her hand. "It's nice to meet you, too." "I watched your exchange with Gregory Morrison," Elizabeth said candidly. "And I wanted to tell you something, dear. I've been attending these events for 40 years, and I've seen countless women try to navigate this world. Most of them either become predators themselves or get devoured." She paused. "But you stood there with grace and composure while men discussed you like you were a business asset. That takes strength." "I was terrified," Lena admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, dear. It's continuing despite it." Elizabeth smiled. "And Victor, I must say, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at this woman. It's quite refreshing to see you interested in something beyond balance sheets and power plays." Victor's expression softened. "She's given me a reason to want more than that." "Good. Life's too short to spend it all in boardrooms." Elizabeth squeezed Lena's hand. "I hope to see you at more events, dear. We need more genuine people in these circles." She swept back inside, leaving Lena staring after her in wonder. "Who was that?" One of the most influential philanthropists in the country. If Elizabeth Rothschild approves of you, half the room will follow her lead. Victor pulled Lena close. See? You're already winning them over. They stayed on the terrace for a few more minutes, Victor pointing out landmarks in the park below, and telling her stories about the city that had nothing to do with business or power. When they finally returned inside, Lena noticed the shift in how people looked at them. Less speculation, more acceptance. Elizabeth's public approval had changed the calculation. The auction itself was absurd. People bidding hundreds of thousands of dollars for vacation packages and artwork and experiences that Lena couldn't even imagine affording. Victor bid on and won a painting by an emerging artist, explaining quietly that the artist reminded him of his mother and he wanted to support her work. "How much did you just spend?" Lena whispered. $75,000. She nearly choked. For one painting? For cancer research and supporting an artist who deserves recognition. Victor squeezed her hand. And because I wanted to. As the evening wound down, Patricia found them again. "You two should come to dinner next month. I host a small gathering for people I actually like, as opposed to these circus events. Much more intimate, much more genuine." "We'd love to," Victor said, glancing at Lena for confirmation. "Absolutely," Lena agreed, touched by the invitation. When they finally left the plaza near midnight, Lena's feet were killing her and her face hurt from smiling, but she felt something close to triumphant. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd held her own in a world that should have eaten her alive. "You promised me somewhere normal," Lena reminded Victor as they climbed into the Mercedes. "Karaoke bar in Brooklyn, remember?" Victor laughed. "I did promise that, didn't I? Alexei, change of plans. We're going to Brooklyn." The karaoke bar was exactly as terrible and wonderful as Lena had promised. Sticky floors, off-key singing, cheap beer, and people who were there to have fun rather than impress anyone. Victor looked absurdly out of place in his tuxedo, but he shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves and threw himself into the experience with surprising enthusiasm. "You have to sing," Lena insisted after her third song. "Absolutely not. You made me walk into a room full of sharks. The least you can do is sing one song." Victor considered this, then nodded. "One song, you choose." Lena picked something ridiculous, a power ballad from the 80s, and watched in delight as Victor Karzan, terrifying crime boss and businessman, murdered the song with complete sincerity. He couldn't really carry a tune, but he committed to it with the same intensity he brought to everything else, and by the end, the entire bar was cheering. When he returned to their table, Lena was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. That was amazing. That was humiliating. That was perfect. Lena kissed him, tasting beer and happiness. "Thank you for doing this, for being willing to exist in my world." "I like your world," Victor said honestly. "It's messy and loud and completely unpretentious. Everyone here is just trying to have a good time." He paused. "My world is so focused on calculation and advantage that we forget how to just be." They stayed until the bar closed at 2, singing terrible songs and drinking cheap beer and laughing at the absurdity of the day. And when they finally stumbled out onto the Brooklyn streets, Lena felt lighter than she had in weeks. "Come home with me," Victor said as they stood beside the Mercedes. "Not to my place, to yours. I want to see your world, really see it." So Lena took him to her 4th-floor walk-up with its broken elevator and cracked walls and the distant sound of the neighbor's television through thin walls. She watched Victor take in her tiny apartment, the secondhand furniture, the books stacked on every surface, the photographs of her mother on the wall, and wondered what he saw. "It's not much," Lena said. "It's honest." Victor picked up a photo of Lena and her mother, both of them laughing at something off camera. "You look happy here." "I was. She made me feel safe, even when we had nothing." Victor set the photo down carefully. "That's what I want to give you, not money or protection or access to my world. Just the feeling that you're safe, that you matter." He turned to face her. "I'm falling in love with you, Lena. I don't know when it happened or how to stop it, and I'm not sure I want to." Lena's breath caught. "Victor, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." He stepped closer, cupping her face. "You've given me something I didn't think I could have. A reason to be better than my father. A reason to want more than power and control. You've given me hope." Lena kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't say into that kiss. Fear and hope, and the terrifying realization that she was falling too, that this dangerous man with his complicated world had somehow become essential to her happiness. They made love in Lena's tiny bed, the streetlights filtering through cheap curtains, the sound of the city a constant backdrop. And afterward, tangled together in sheets that had seen better days, Victor held her close and told her about his plans. "I'm restructuring my business," he said quietly. "Getting out of the gray areas, focusing on legitimate ventures. It's going to take time and there will be pushback, but I don't want to be the man my father was. I don't want to build an empire on fear and violence." "What changed?" "You." Victor's fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. "You made me remember that there are other ways to have power. That influence built on respect is stronger than influence built on fear." He paused. "And I want to build something I'm not ashamed to share with you. I'm not asking you to change for me. I'm not changing for you. I'm changing for myself, because being with you makes me want to be someone worthy of you." Victor kissed her forehead. "You deserve better than a man who makes his living in shadows." "I'm getting exactly what I deserve," Lena said firmly. "A man who sees me, who values me, who's trying to be better than his worst impulses. That's more than most people get." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other in Lena's small bed. And when morning came, Lena woke to find Victor already awake, watching her with that same tender expression from yesterday. "I could get used to this," she murmured. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." Over the next few months, Lena watched Victor methodically transform his life. He cut ties with questionable associates, invested in legitimate businesses, used his influence to support causes he believed in rather than just profit from them. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't clean. There were threats and pushback, and moments when Lena worried that Victor would get hurt trying to leave a world that didn't let people leave easily. But he persevered, and Lena stood beside him through all of it. She kept her job at Metro Diner because it grounded her, kept her connected to the people and world she'd come from. But she also started taking business classes at night, learning about the world Victor operated in so she could understand and support him better. Victor bought the building Lena lived in and renovated it, not kicking anyone out but making it safer, cleaner, more livable. Mrs. Chen cried when he installed a working elevator and fixed her apartment's plumbing. Marcus got a new kitchen at the diner, courtesy of an anonymous donor who everyone knew was Victor. "You're changing things," Lena told him one evening as they walked through the renovated building, "making a difference in people's lives." "That's what power should be for," Victor said. "Not control or domination. Improvement, protection, making the world slightly better than you found it." 6 months after the auction, Lena stood in Victor's townhouse helping him prepare for a dinner party. Not the kind of formal event they'd attended at the plaza, but the intimate gathering Patricia had promised. A dozen people who Victor actually liked and respected, coming together for good food and honest conversation. "Nervous?" Victor asked, adjusting his tie. "Should I be? These are friends, not business associates. They'll probably ask embarrassing questions and tell stories about me that make me look foolish." He smiled. "It'll be good for my humility." The party was exactly as advertised, warm, genuine, full of laughter and real connection. Patricia praised Lena's work with the foundation she'd started to help women escape controlling relationships, using the connections Victor had provided and the knowledge she'd gained from her own experience. Malcolm Chen argued politics with Victor in the good-natured way of old friends who disagreed on everything but respected each other anyway. And Elizabeth Rothschild cornered Lena in the kitchen with a knowing smile. "You've changed him," she said simply. "I've known Victor since he was a teenager, and I've watched him build walls around himself for protection. But with you, those walls are coming down." "He's changing himself," Lena corrected. "I'm just giving him a reason to want to." "That's all any of us can do, dear." Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "Love doesn't transform people. It gives them the courage to transform themselves." Later, as the guests were leaving and Victor was saying goodbyes at the door, Patricia pulled Lena aside. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are. For not letting this world change you or make you hard." Patricia's eyes were kind. "I've seen too many good people get corrupted by money and power, but you've stayed genuine. That's a gift." After everyone left, Lena and Victor stood in his kitchen washing dishes together like a normal couple in a normal relationship, which, despite everything, was what they were becoming. "That went well?" Lena said, handing him a plate to dry. "It did." Victor set the plate aside and turned to face her. I have something to ask you. That sounds ominous. It's not ominous, it's terrifying. He took her hands, and Lena saw genuine nervousness in his eyes. Move in with me. Not because I want to control where you live or who you see, but because I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to come home to you every evening. I want to build a life with you. Lena's heart was racing. Victor, I'm not asking you to give up your independence or your job or your friends. Keep all of it. I just want to be part of your daily life the way you've become part of mine. He paused. What do you say? Lena thought about it, about the tiny apartment she'd lived in for 5 years, about the independence she'd fought so hard to maintain, about all the warnings from Jamie and Mrs. Chen, about cages and control. But she also thought about the months she'd spent with Victor, watching him change and grow, building trust and partnership rather than dependence. On one condition, she said finally, anything. I pay rent, market rate. I'm not moving in as your kept woman, I'm moving in as your partner. Equal footing. Victor's smile was radiant. I wouldn't have it any other way. They negotiated the details like partners. Lena would keep a separate bank account, maintain her financial independence, split household expenses proportionally based on their very different incomes. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest, and that mattered more. When Lena told Jamie about the decision, her roommate was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure? Jamie asked finally. This is a big step. I'm sure. Not because I need him, but because I want this. Want us. Lena met her friend's eyes. I haven't lost myself, Jamie. I've just found someone who makes me want to be better. Then I'm happy for you. Jamie hugged her tight. But if he ever makes you feel small or controlled or less than you are, you call me. Day or night. Got it? Got it. Lena moved into Victor's townhouse on a Saturday in late spring, Marcus and Alexei helping carry boxes, while Jamie supervised and made sarcastic comments about the absurdity of moving from a 4th-floor walk-up to a mansion. Mrs. Chen came to bless the house with incense and prayers, and Marcus checked every room to make sure it was good enough for our girl. And that evening, after everyone had left and the boxes were mostly unpacked, Lena stood in the living room of the townhouse and realized she was home. Not because of the expensive furniture or the space or the luxury, but because Victor was there, looking at her like she was the most important thing in his world, and she felt the same way about him. Dance with me, Victor said, extending his hand. There's no music. We don't need music. He pulled her close and they swayed together in the quiet house, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. Do you remember the first time we danced? Lena asked. Every second. You were covered in champagne and terrified and absolutely magnificent. Victor's hand tightened at her waist. I knew then that you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how completely. I was so scared of you. You should have been. I was dangerous. He paused. I'm still dangerous. That doesn't just go away. I know, but you're dangerous in defense now, not offense. There's a difference. Lena looked up at him. You're not your father, Victor. You never were. You just needed someone to show you that you had a choice. You showed me more than that. You showed me what it feels like to be seen as a person rather than a position, to be valued for who I am rather than what I can provide. Victor stopped dancing and cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Lena Hart. Completely. Irrevocably. In ways that terrify me because I've never needed anyone the way I need you. I love you too, Lena said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Even though you're complicated and dangerous and you have terrible taste in music. Victor laughed, that real, genuine laugh she'd learned to treasure. My taste in music is excellent. You literally sang an 80s power ballad off-key at a karaoke bar. I sang it with feeling. That's what matters. They stood there holding each other as the sun set through the windows, painting the room in gold and amber light. And Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here, from invisible waitress to woman who'd claimed space in a powerful man's world without losing herself in the process. She'd walked into a ballroom 6 months ago wearing a borrowed dress and left with something more valuable than money or status. She'd found a partner, someone who saw her and valued her and was willing to change himself to be worthy of her, someone who'd given her a key to the cage and trusted her to use it wisely. What are you thinking about? Victor asked. That we should do this more often. Dance in empty rooms? Just be. without the rest of the world watching or judging or calculating. Lena smiled. I like us best when it's just us. Then let's make a rule, Victor said. One evening a week, just us. No business, no social obligations, no one else's expectations, just you and me and whatever we want to do. Even if what I want to do is watch terrible reality TV and eat takeout on the couch. Especially that. Victor kissed her forehead. I'm done performing for everyone else, Lena. The only person I want to impress anymore is you. You already do, every day. They ordered pizza that night and ate it sitting on the floor of their bedroom, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the comfortable chaos of building a shared life. And later, as they fell asleep tangled together in Victor's massive bed, Lena felt the key bracelet on her wrist, a reminder that she'd chosen this, that she could choose differently tomorrow if she needed to, but that right now, this was exactly where she wanted to be. The next morning, Lena woke to find Victor already up and dressed, standing at the window with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low and tense, and she caught fragments of the conversation. I don't care what Morrison thinks. No, that's final. I'm done negotiating with people who don't respect boundaries. He ended the call and turned to find Lena watching him. Sorry, did I wake you? What's wrong? Victor sat on the edge of the bed. Morrison's making a final push to bring me back into some ventures I walked away from. He's not happy about my decision to go legitimate. Is he threatening you? He's trying to, but he's forgotten that I built this empire before I met him, and I can maintain it without him. Victor took her hand. I'm done with that part of my life, Lena. Completely. Whatever consequences that brings, I'll handle them. We'll handle them, Lena corrected. Together. Victor's smile was grateful and genuine. Together. The consequences came swiftly. Morrison pulled out of several business ventures, taking his capital and connections with him. Some of Victor's other associates followed, worried about the shift in his priorities. There were threats, subtle at first, then more direct, from people who saw Victor's transformation as weakness to be exploited. But Victor stood firm, and Lena stood with him. She used her foundation to help people caught in the crossfire, providing resources and support for those who wanted to leave dangerous situations. She built bridges between Victor's world and the legitimate business community, introducing him to people who valued ethics over profit margins. And slowly, painfully, Victor's life transformed. The gray areas became clear boundaries. The questionable associates were replaced by genuine partners. The empire built on fear became something built on respect and mutual benefit. It took a year, but eventually the threats subsided. Morrison realized that Victor's resolve wouldn't break, and that continuing to push would cost more than it was worth. The business community saw that Victor's transformation was genuine, not strategic, and adjusted their assessment accordingly. And through it all, Lena and Victor built a life that balanced both their worlds. They had dinner at Metro Diner every week, Victor sitting in the cracked vinyl booth and chatting with Marcus like an old friend. They attended charity galas where Victor used his influence to raise money for causes that mattered. They spent quiet evenings at home, just the two of them, being the people they'd chosen to become. On their one-year anniversary, Victor took Lena back to the Rothmore Hotel where they'd first met. They stood in the same ballroom, now empty and quiet, and he held her the way he had that first night. Do you remember what I said to you about dancing? Victor asked. That it's about trust and response. I was wrong. He pulled her closer. It's about partnership. Two people moving together, supporting each other, creating something beautiful from mutual effort. That's very poetic for someone who can't carry a tune, Victor laughed. I've learned a lot from you about seeing beauty in imperfection. They danced in the empty ballroom, no orchestra this time, just the echo of their footsteps on marble and the memory of where they'd started. And when the dance ended, Victor didn't pull away. He went down on one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Lena Hart, you've given me more than I ever thought I deserved. You've shown me that power isn't about control, it's about protection. That strength isn't about domination, it's about choosing to be vulnerable with someone you trust. He opened the box, revealing a simple ring with a diamond that caught the light. I'm asking you to marry me, not because I need to possess you or control you, but because I want to build a life with you, as equals, as partners, as people who choose each other every single day. Lena looked at the ring, then at Victor's face, at the hope and fear and love she saw there. She thought about the journey they'd taken, the ways they'd both changed and grown, The life they'd built from trust and honesty and mutual respect. Yes, she said simply. 1,000 times yes. Victor slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise, like a beginning. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I love you too, even though you're still terrible at karaoke. I'm never going to live that down, am I? Never. Lena laughed, joy bubbling up in her chest. But that's what you get for falling in love with someone who values honesty over image. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony that brought together both their worlds, Marcus and Jamie and Mrs. Chen sitting beside Patricia and Elizabeth and Malcolm, the diner crew mixing with Manhattan's elite in a celebration that was genuine and warm and completely unpretentious. And afterward, when they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Lena looked into Victor's eyes and saw the man he'd become. Not the dangerous crime boss or the ruthless businessman, but the partner who'd chosen to be better because she'd shown him it was possible. No regrets? Victor asked as they swayed together. Not a single one. Not even about the champagne. Lena smiled, remembering that night so long ago when a glass had shattered and changed everything. Especially not about the champagne. It brought me to you. It brought us to each other, Victor corrected. I was just as lost as you were. I just hid it better. We found each other, Lena agreed, and that's what matters. They danced until the music ended and the guests drifted away and the night grew quiet around them. And when they finally left for their honeymoon, a week in Italy where no one knew who they were and they could just be Lena and Victor without the weight of expectations, Lena felt the key bracelet on her wrist and smiled. She'd walked into a cage of her own choosing, but she'd kept the key. And in doing so, she discovered that the real freedom wasn't in staying away from commitment or keeping walls around her heart. It was in choosing to trust someone enough to let them in, knowing she had the power to choose differently if she needed to. Victor had given her that power, and she'd given him something equally valuable, the courage to be more than his father's son, more than a position or a reputation. The courage to be human. That was what love was, Lena thought as they boarded the plane to Rome. Not possession or control or the surrender of self, but the mutual choice to be vulnerable, to support each other's growth, to build something together that was stronger than either person alone. She'd been invisible once, a waitress serving coffee to people who never really saw her. But Victor had seen her, and in seeing her, he'd helped her see herself differently, not as someone powerless and small, but as someone brave enough to take risks, strong enough to hold her ground, and wise enough to know when accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. And in return, she'd seen him. The man beneath the armor. The person trying desperately to be better than his worst impulses. The partner who'd given her a key and trusted her to use it well. That was their dance. Not the first one in a ballroom full of strangers, but this one. The daily choice to support and challenge and love each other through all the complications life brought. And as the plane lifted into the sky, carrying them toward a future they'd build together, Lena held Victor's hand and knew that whatever came next, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. As equals. As partners who'd found each other in the most unlikely place and chosen to build something real from the wreckage of their pasts. The dance would continue, but this time they were dancing to their own rhythm, creating their own music, building their own kind of beautiful from trust and love and the courage to keep choosing each other. And that, Lena thought as Victor kissed her hand and smiled with genuine happiness, was the best kind of freedom there was.